across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell here between now and 1 o'clock. There's loads to talk about this Friday morning, and I want to talk about it with you. There's a lot happening with the China deal, and the question is, what have we actually got out of it? Is that it? 30-day visa-free travel for British citizens to China. I won't be going anytime soon. I don't know about you. A reduction in Chinese tariffs on Scottish whiskey from 10% to 5%. Well, I mean, good for the whiskey industry, but what about the rest of us? There are a couple of other things like broader strategic commitments, long-term, consistent, comprehensive strategic partnership. What does that mean? Well, probably very, very little. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what Donald Trump has said as well about China. He says it's very dangerous to do business with them. We'll also talk about those cancelled elections. We'll talk about the fact that shoplifting happens every single minute. There are 3 shoplifting incidents, but you're less likely to be murdered. We'll talk to Peter Blexley about all of that. And also an anti-reform protest at Sussex University. Some very interesting polling saying that many students, about 2/3 of them, more actually, believe, yeah, free speech on campus, really, really important, but guess what? They don't want Reform UK there. So yet again, we're in a situation where it's free speech, but only if you agree with me. Very, very odd and very hypocritical, if you ask me. We'll speak to Graham Stringer MP a little bit later on. Was Rachel Reeves sidelined on the China trip? She was originally meant to go and then did not. And what about all those millionaires that are fleeing this country? You may say, well, good riddance, they've got loads of money. If they're not patriotic enough to pay their taxes, off they go. But actually, they pay a heck of a lot of tax, and that allows public services to happen and to be at the levels that they are. We'll talk as well about veterans attacking Starmer for his work with the disgraced lawyer Phil Shiner. That story rumbles on, and if you're a veteran or from a military family, I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, to 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message to that number as well, or give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Thank you so much for your company this morning. There's loads to talk about. Let's spend the next 3 hours together here on Talk. And just a reminder that I'm here tomorrow and Sunday between 10 and 1 for those weekend shows, back on the weekends, and loads to discuss then. Big political interviews, of course, too. And we'll look back on the week. There's a lot to discuss in all of that. We'll talk about those elections being cancelled as well. Donald Trump says doing business with China is very dangerous. We'll have a look and talk about that in just a second with Henry Hill. But let's hear from the president himself, what he has been saying at the premiere of Melania, this documentary about his wife.
President, what do you think about the UK getting into business with China? Keir Starmer was in Beijing.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China.
Well, it's interesting, actually, that Trump himself is going to China in April, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. What have we actually got out of this big box office visit from Keir Starmer? It's been called historic. It is absolutely in no way historic. 8 years ago, Theresa May went. It is simply another Prime Minister going to China with the begging bowl out. What have we actually got? Well, the thing he hasn't got is the release of the jailed British citizen Jimmy Lai. We'll talk more about that in a second. What he has got is 33-day visa-free travel for British citizens to China for tourism or business days under 30 days. I mean, 50 other countries have that as well, so hooray, good for us. A reduction in Chinese tariffs on Scotch whisky from 10 to 5%. Okay, that's good. AstraZeneca has said it's going to invest £15 billion in China throughout 2030. Well, good for them, but that benefits the Chinese far more than it benefits us. Agreements on service sector cooperation and a feasibility study for potential future bilateral negotiations. I know my heart skips a beat when I hear about that and broader strategic commitments. I mean, that is just all so meaningless. Let's talk to Henry Hill, who's Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, about this. Henry, what is the point of all of this? Is there really any reason? And actually, we heard Keir Starmer as well saying it's for our nation's security. That, to me, actually shows weakness. That, to me, shows that he's afraid of China. What do you think?
I mean, it's just part of the typical British tango about China, which we've been through under every single government, which is that, at one moment we're looking at the security implications, the fact that the Chinese regime perpetrates genocide in Xinjiang, and the fact that its companies, it doesn't really have private companies in the sense that we know about them. Every single major company has a connection to the Communist Party, that it steals technology and patents and all the rest of it, and we're passing laws against that. And then, we oscillate a bit and we realize that, oh my God, our economy is terrible and maybe we need some foreign direct investment. And all of a sudden we're going to have a new golden age of Chinese relations in the desperate hope that they'll start putting some money into the economy. And then in a few years' time, we'll notice that those companies are posing some sort of threat or other to our national security or our industrial security, and then we'll start cracking down again. We've been through this cycle several times already under the Conservatives and under Labour, and I don't suppose it's going to change anytime soon.
It's interesting as well when you look at people like Liz Truss, who did a total 180 on her views on China. At one stage, she was really pro-China when she was International Trade Secretary. She was talking about China being the key to growth and the key and doing so much business with them, and they're marvellous. Then she became Prime Minister for such a short time. Then she said to Rishi Sunak, her successor, that we should be classifying China as a threat. I mean, I think China is a threat, but will there ever be any consistency in this? Because the Chinese themselves, not that I have any sympathy for them, but they are in a position where they say, well, we don't know what's going to happen from year to year, from Prime Minister to Prime Minister. And of course, with Keir Starmer looking not particularly stable at the moment, there may well be another one along in a minute who has very different views on China.
I mean, I think the fact that it is difficult to have a consistent foreign policy when you're a democracy that changes your government every so often and whose governments change their minds is inconvenient from the diplomat's perspective, but it is broadly important. If you're a democratic country, I think actually one of the problems that we often run into with things like, the ECHR and various other treaty commitments is that we international lawyers try and get that kind of long-term certainty by essentially insulating foreign policy commitments from democratic pressure, which is not a good thing. China obviously has the advantage as well of being a one-party state, which makes it very much easier to have a consistent foreign policy over a long period of time, because you also have a consistent domestic policy, because nobody's allowed to change their mind about anything. So it's a problem, but I think it's a problem inherent to our system of government, but also our just very confused understanding of our place in the world. Because you can Britain has two options, which are both coherent. One of them, it sort of accepts that it's a city of spies. London is a city of spies. That Britain is a frontier state between China and America, who are the sort of powers of the 21st century. And we try and do what some states during the Cold War did. The leader of Afghanistan once said he wanted to light Russian cigarettes with American matches and that kind of thing. And you play them off against each other for your own national advantage. Alternatively, we could decide that no, we are committed to the Western Alliance and to the principles of that alliance, including human rights, and we could therefore be really strict about China, and especially about the danger of China stealing patents and technology, because of course one of the few things that Britain is still good at is technological innovation. We're currently very bad at getting those companies to maturity, and it's a real structural weakness for us that often somebody will invent something here, and then the business of doing business in Britain is so miserable that they'll go off to America to make all of the money. They haven't at least invented it here. But Chinese companies steal patents, and that is a real problem if most of what your economy does in the technology sphere is patents. So we could be really strict. But the problem is that we have no consistency of approach at all. We simply, 1 year, notice that they're doing something bad, that they're posing a security threat, and we crack down. And then a couple of years down the line, the Chancellor is desperate for money and goes to beg for some. That's the problem.
One of the issues I want to talk about as well, and one of the things, in fairness, that Keir Starmer did bring up, we don't know how vociferously, was Jimmy Lai. He's a British businessman and newspaper owner who is about to be sentenced. He has been, trumped-up charges have been laid against him by the Chinese regime. Let's just play a little bit of my colleague Julie Hartley-Brewer chatting to Jimmy Lai's son Sebastian Lai. Let's see a little bit of this.
So this idea that we would trade our freedom, our citizens, our human rights for any perceived economical benefit is not only wrong, it's also completely illogical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this idea of warming relationships if they can't even do something so human, so right, and so rational, actually, because there's direct impact to China's reputation and to Hong Kong's economy, keeping my father in there. Yeah. Then what can we, what can we expect from that relationship?
But also, crucially, he is a British citizen.
Well, that's a very, very good point. Henry, there didn't seem to be very much progress on this. It was brought up, as were the Uyghur Muslims and the genocide that China is perpetrating against them, but it didn't seem to get very far. It didn't come back with Jimmy Lai, didn't secure Jimmy Lai's freedom. And one would have thought, given everything that we've given China, that Keir Starmer might be in a slightly better negotiating position. But maybe this just shows his weakness.
But but that's not how this works, is it? It's not about like, oh, we've given you this much stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to give us something. It's about strength. It's about whether or not we have things that the Chinese want in the future, whether or not they think they actually need to give us things to get them, which is possibly not the case if we keep giving them things anyway. Frankly, the deal we came to when we handed over Hong Kong was functionally just a way of making British politicians feel better about what they were doing. Yeah. Right. Because the fact is that yes, the new territories were leased for 100 years and all the rest of it, and we would have had to give those back anyway. But Hong Kong Island territory was ours in perpetuity. There were practical arguments about whether or not it was viable, but we'd handed it back to China, which is a one-party dictatorship, and we need to own that decision. Yeah. And so at the time, the Chinese came up with this lovely little arrangement where Hong Kong would be exempt from all sorts of things that apply on the Chinese mainland, and it would be able to remain this sort of strange little part British exclave. And then the Chinese eventually decided that they were bored of that and that they were going to crack on with integrating it properly into China. And I don't think there was any reason to expect that not to happen at some point. Yes. So, yeah, it's obviously hideous what's happened to Jimmy Lau and all the rest of it, but it was what we need to own is the fact that, we handed a territory full
and what did we expect? I think that's all very fair analysis. Henry, as always, thank you. Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Thanks to Joanna in Salisbury, says, hi, Cardi P. Hi, Joanna, lovely to have your text this morning, thank you. I'm not rushing to China, says Joanna. They may not let me out. If they've been accessing my texts or listening to my comments on Talk, I'll end up in an internment camp. Steve says, good morning, Peter. Didn't anyone tell Starmer they didn't need to go all the way to Beijing just to open a Temu account? That is Stephen in Bristol. Let's speak to Herbie in Harrow. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Herbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say this morning?
Good morning, Peter. Well, the puppet master is certainly pulling the strings of the puppet, isn't he? Very, very well. He's getting exactly what he wants, and we're getting really absolutely nothing. We're getting peanuts. I mean, to say, Sir Keir Starmer could have said to Ching that we want this man released, send him over to the UK, and he can, serve his time there if need be, not in a prison where he's being tortured and everything else.
I mean, listen, I totally believe and agree with you that should have happened. Do you think she would have listened at all? Do you think he would have said, right, Keir Starmer, I agree with you, you're right and you can have this, and Jimmy Lai's on his way back? Because I just don't see any position of strength. I see a massive country, huge trading partner, third biggest trading partner of this country, and a president who can just say to the Prime Minister, well, I'll do whatever I want.
Well, look, he's put himself in power for the rest of his life, so to speak. He shows you what he's like. He's a dictator, which I think Starmer's trying to copy him on. The man can't be trusted any longer. He's not got the power to negotiate with anybody. He's a weak man with bad ideas and destroying this country once and for all. And to give the embassy, the go-ahead, well, that's about says it all. He's got what he wants. China's got what they want. We've got absolutely nothing, Peter. Absolutely nothing.
Herbie, thanks for your thoughts this morning. I appreciate that. That's Herbie in Harrow there. Suze has been in touch too and says, morning, Peter. Where are all the lefty Saturday marches against the actual genocide of the Uyghur Muslims? Nothing would persuade me to spend my money on a visit to a communist totalitarian state. Suze, that's a very, very good point. And where are all these lefties who really care about human rights and really care about oppression and really care about people and women not having their rights and being oppressed and being abused when it comes to Iran, for example, as well? It's really funny that there's a repressive, horrendous Islamist regime that is repressing people that's oh gosh, look, an enemy of Israel, because Israel's always wrong, as we know. So yeah, unsurprisingly, those people stay at home, because guess what? They don't care about human rights. They don't care about people being oppressed. They only care about Israel, because Israel's always wrong. No Jews, no news. That is their view on that. Pedro says, good afternoon, Peter. Phil from Hertfordshire. It's still the morning, but nonetheless, thank you. Strategic commitments long term. Maybe Starmer is out there learning tactics and getting tips on how to suppress the people, like the 15 mini-cities in Oxfordshire, digital ID, that's what he's... 15-minute cities in Oxfordshire, digital ID, that's what he's possibly doing, in my opinion. Well, I don't think we're quite at Communist Party levels of surveillance just yet, and I hope we never ever get there. I don't want social capital. I don't want anything like the way the Chinese do things, but I know there are a lot of fears about how Keir Starmer is running the country. Whatever your view on all of that, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222. Lots more to discuss, including with Peter Blexley, because the shoplifting rate is soaring across Britain. 3 thefts every minute. Major crisis for retailers. But the good news is you're less likely to get murdered. I'm sure that makes us all feel better. Stay with us here on Talk.
Right for me.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically?
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now about shoplifting, because there were over 500,000 cases of shoplifting in this country in the 12 months of last September, a jump of 5%. 3 offences every minute during typical shop opening times. The Office for National Statistics said the number of sex crimes reported up 8% at a record 214,816. Nearly 75,000 rapes in this country. Almost, well, it is indeed a record. Let's talk to Peter Blexley about this, our crime commentator here at the station, former Metropolitan Police detective. Peter, given the scourge of shoplifting particularly, given how many people see it happening with impunity, does this shock you at all?
Not in the slightest. In fact, the shoplifting epidemic is way, way worse than these figures would illustrate today, because so much shoplifting is simply not reported. Shopkeepers don't report it because they know the police won't attend. They know that people won't be detained. They know there will be no justice. The shoplifting problem is far, far bigger, far more damaging to the economy, far more damaging to the actual well-being of the nation, because so many people witness it on a daily basis, see no justice being delivered, and therefore they go, who on earth can we trust in this country? Who's going to deliver justice? And what is the point of working so hard when there are so many people just out there thieving?
It is very true, certainly, that, I mean, we've all seen, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people have seen shoplifting happening. They've certainly seen videos of it happening. People just putting stuff into their bags, taking it away, and really security guards and other staff fearful to actually confront people a lot of the time. You're right with these statistics, because there are so many shopkeepers now who simply have it priced in to the price, and certainly when you have cost of living rises and so on, we're all paying for it, Peter, aren't we?
Oh yes, undoubtedly. We're all paying more at the till for this epidemic of shoplifting. And of course, many of the major retailers these days have what they call non-intervention policies for their security staff. So they are actually instructed not to intervene, other than perhaps the very, very basic of stopping somebody, asking them to return the goods. And if they don't, they simply walk out with impunity. I witnessed shoplifting right in front of me last Friday when I was in Scarborough. A woman came into a famous branch of a coffee shop, loaded up her bag with bacon rolls, sausage rolls, even started taking the most valuable coins out of the staff tip jar.
Goodness me.
Yeah, and then when confronted by the staff, who were youngsters, she was persuaded to return the goods, and in return for returning the goods that she had stolen, the shop rewarded her by giving her 2 pastries.
Goodness
as opposed to. So.
Oh, Peter, I think the line is slightly breaking up. Do we have you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I mean that is absurd and awful, and just an illustration of Britain in 2026, Peter. There's just so much of this. I want to turn to the rape statistics as well. A record for reported rapes. We know, of course, that there are lots of reasons why people often drop out of the very lengthy process of reporting a rape. Getting to court, the conviction rate is very low, but that's often because so many people drop out of the process because it takes so long. And I suppose although they're very, very different crimes, of course they are, rape, shoplifting, all these crimes that were being reported today, is the fact that it takes so long, that justice often doesn't happen for lots of reasons, no fault necessarily of the police or the Crown Prosecution Service. Some of it is, some of it isn't. I just wonder what your view is in terms of public confidence, especially when they see these statistics and seeing crime rising in these 2 very controversial areas.
A sense of justice cuts to the very heart of Britishness. It's why we have expressions in the past like, it's just not cricket, when something is not just, when something is not fair. It's part of the national psyche. It's what so many of us were raised to believe in, that there will be justice, that honesty is the best policy, that you behave, you abide by the rule of law. It is so, so important. That, in front of our very eyes, is crumbling now. The rule of law is crumbling. People are not having trust in our institutions, in our police. And consequently, we are becoming a low trust society. Yeah. History has proven again and again and again that in low trust societies, very, very bad things happen.
Tell us about the murder statistics. They are down, in fact, it's the lowest in 40 years. But a lot of this is to do with far more people staying at home and perhaps not being out and about in more dangerous situations, maybe late at night. So there are reasons for this, Peter, aren't there?
Yes, there are. But it gives me great pleasure to actually praise the Metropolitan Police here, because with regards to London, they've had a policy of targeting the 100 most violent offenders. These are gang members. These are, many of them, people who would be very likely to put a stainless steel blade in you right up to the hilt and kill you. The Met have targeted these criminals, and they've targeted them in a way that I'd like to do. Surveillance, kicking down their doors, searching their homes, letting them know that they are very much on the police radar. But police resources are limited, so I'm going to heap praise on them for doing that. There's other factors. Of course, people aren't going out like they did before COVID. We see that in the nighttime economy crumbling.
Yes.
So I would urge anybody on this Friday night, worked very hard all week, you've made yourself some money, go out, go to that pub, have a drink, enjoy yourself. If you don't drink, do a Peter Cardwell, sit in the pub and have a soft drink, because Peter Cardwell still enjoys the company of people in the pub.
Indeed, I've enjoyed the company of Peter Blexley in the pub as well. When you look at what the Crime and Policing Minister is saying specifically about shoplifting, we must do more, but there are positive signs. The number of people charged has gone up by 21%, with 1 in 5 offences now leading to a charge. 1 in 5 offences leading to a charge. I wouldn't say that that is a good record.
It's for the birds as well. That stat is nowhere near reliable, because there is such a raft of unreported shoplifting. There's millions of unreported shoplifting crimes that are happening every single day. And just to repeat myself, shoplifters don't report it because they know there's going to be no police attendance and no justice. So that's utter poppycock. This sense of lawlessness, which we are seeing through this shoplifting, through knife crime, through general lawlessness and crimes that don't get investigated, don't get solved, is really rotting at the very core of the nation. Something very serious has to be done in order to make the nation feel better, to make the nation feel that bad guys and girls get what they deserve, rather than committing crime and getting away with it with impunity.
Peter, I sense you're perhaps in a hotel at the moment. I know you're on your tour at the moment. Where do you find yourself today?
Yes, well, this morning we woke up in a hotel in Stockport, having performed at the Plaza, a beautiful theatre last night. And in a little while, we're on our way to Lincoln, to the new Theatre Royal, to deliver my show there tonight. There are apparently just a few seats remaining.
Excellent stuff. And you're just really at the start of this tour, aren't you? There's a lot of places to go over many months to come.
Yes, indeed. The tour doesn't end until the end of November. I'm travelling the length and breadth of the UK. Please go to entertainers.co.uk. You'll find all the shows there. And please buy your tickets early, because many, many venues, I'm pleased to say, are selling out.
And I've seen lots of wonderful reviews as well of Peter's show. Peter, thank you. Peter Blexley there, our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective. It'll be a couple of months yet before I see Peter's show, but I am going, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing that. What do you think of what he said there? Have you seen shoplifting in action? Have you been a victim of crime? Is it something that you want to talk about? Maybe you want to talk about the rape statistics, or the fact that the murder statistics are down. Does it make you feel any better that the murder statistics are down, or is that just a symptom of what's happening with our society? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Starmer has arranged for visa-free visits to China, but crazy Ed Miliband said we can't fly anywhere. Make your mind up, Labour, says Debbie. Lots of views coming in. Do make sure you give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Lots to talk about this Friday morning. Stay with us here on Talk, because we're going to talk in just a second more about China with Ian Williams, who's the author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody who's got in touch. We will certainly get to more calls, text, tweets and voice notes in just a few minutes. And remember that 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you've got any thoughts on what you hear today. Donald Trump says it's very dangerous for the UK to do business with China. This is Starmer in Shanghai now. He's been in Beijing. Let's just play that clip again of what Donald Trump said at the premiere of the Netflix documentary about his wife Melania. This is the president.
Mr. President, what do you think about the UK getting into business with China? Keir Starmer was in Beijing.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China.
He talked about Canada as well, of course. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, seems to be tilting towards China and away from the United States. So it's a very, very interesting view on the kind of economies looking towards one another. Ian Williams is the author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. Ian, lovely to have you on the programme. Do you agree with Donald Trump that it is very dangerous for the UK to deal with China, or is it simply a fact of life that you've got to?
I think you need to engage with China because you can't ignore the place. It's such a big economy, but you know, it's how you do it, it's what you say and the tone that you take. And I think that doing business with China can be very dangerous if it means building up dependencies in critical areas, becoming too dependent on them in things like renewable energy technologies. It needs an extremely cautious approach. We have to be aware that this is a state that engages in industrial scale influence operations, cyber espionage, intimidation of opponents overseas. All this has to be taken into account, and we have to talk to them robustly, and we have to be extremely cautious. Yes, we could trade with them, but let's look at the way we do it, what we trade in, and the dependencies we allow ourselves to build up. And I don't see any of that nuance, any of that subtlety in the Starmer government's approach to China.
Well, I don't see any of the robustness that you're talking about. And I suppose when you're coming from such a position of weakness, both domestically and internationally, when you're Keir Starmer, how can you be robust, or do you just have to find it within yourself? I suppose, I mean, I just see we've given China so much. We've given them this mega embassy. You know, Keir Starmer has visited. He's brought all these business figures. He doesn't seem to be bringing very much back. And actually, if you look at the front page of the Daily Mail today, it simply says, "Is that it? Is that something that you agree with? I mean, is that it?"
Totally. I mean, if you look at the ledger of what's been given away over the last year, the appeasement from the embassy through to the failure to list China as a threat in the new foreigner influence registration scheme, the so-called audit that was fudged, the collapse of the China spying trial. I mean, this is just one appeasement after another. And this was supposed to be the trip where Starmer kind of cashed in, if you like, went there to see all the promise of economic opportunity, trade, investment, and what do we get? Visa-free access and a reduction in tariffs on whiskey. I mean, it's pretty pitiful.
And 50 other countries have that visa-free access. It's not as if we're getting anything special. It's not as if we're being sort of stroked and our cheek. Sorry, go ahead.
That's right. And also, Peter, if you look at it, I mean, poor old tourists heading to China, if you want to brave that, then you're not going to have the luxury of burner phones or throwaway laptops when you turn up in China, which of course have been issued to Starmer and his entourage.
Well, the burner plane as well. I mean, he didn't even go on a government jet. He went on a jet that was hired. Let's give the Prime Minister his due. Let's hear what he is speaking about, what he said in Beijing yesterday. He says his trip is acting in our national interest. This is what the Prime Minister said in Beijing yesterday.
Relationship is in a good place, a strong place, and what I'd say to everybody here is that I always act in our national interest, and therefore the question for me is how does this accelerate and deliver back at home. I know that whatever's going on in the world, the most important thing to the vast majority of people is the cost of living. So opening up access to business, opportunities, seizing those opportunities, which then gets reflected in better businesses, in jobs, in price reductions at home, really, really matter. And so we made real progress on all of those areas.
I mean, that was just meaningless. He didn't make real progress in all of those areas, did he, Ian?
I mean, the problem is, I've covered a lot of these occasions in Beijing, and usually the amount of platitudes and cliches is in inverse proportion to the substance. You know, and we had a blizzard of cliches over the last 2 days about improving relations and wanting to be a more sophisticated relationship. You name it, but I don't see what any of that means. I mean, you know, over the centuries, you've had missions going to Beijing carrying tribute and gifts to the emperor, and there was Starmer taking a football, by all accounts, which was autographed by the Manchester United team, supposedly Starmer's favourite team. And I just wish he'd got that out and dribbled his way down that honour line, all those soldiers, because
yes.
it might have brightened it up, because China is very good at this totalitarian theatre, these sombre ceremonial events, you know, and a lot of wide-eyed diplomats and others that go there get sucked into the occasion.
Yes.
And actually, when you strip it all away, the amount of substance is very slight.
Well, it's interesting, you know, he said we're in a good place, a strong place. I wonder, I mean, I expect the answer is no, but do you have any sympathy with the Chinese? Because there do seem, there are many things. There are repressive, horrendous dictatorship that is dreadful and should be condemned, that commits genocide against the Uyghurs, that is not freeing Jimmy Lai. We'll perhaps talk about that in a second. But actually, at least they're consistent, I suppose, whereas our view as a nation is so inconsistent. You look at someone like Liz Truss, I was talking about earlier, who, when she was Trade Secretary, was really pro-China. Now she's really anti-China. And of course, we have many parliamentarians who are banned by China as well. People like Ian Duncan Smith and Tom Tugendhat as well. So I just wonder, given the shifting sands and the movement, and in fact this was remarked upon by President Xi as well, do we need to be consistent on China?
I think we do need to be consistent, and we need to be robust, consistently robust, and we need to call China out, and we need to recognise our own national interest, and we need to recognise the pitfalls in embracing China too tightly, embracing Chinese technology and Chinese investment in sensitive parts of the economy. You're right, China is consistent. You asked me whether I ever felt sorry for China. I had a moment last year, I have to say, when with all the money they spend on spying and influence operations, and of course they ended up with Prince Andrew.
Yes, exactly. Yes, you wouldn't wish him on your worst enemy, quite literally. Let's have a little look at what Jimmy Lai's brother told my colleague Julia Hartley-Brewer yesterday. I'll get your view on that particular issue. This businessman, Jimmy Lai, is being held in China. And I mean, he is a democracy activist. There's no way he should be held. There's no way he should be imprisoned. He should be free with his family. Let's have a look at what Sebastian Lai said to Julia Hartley-Brewer yesterday.
So this idea that we would trade our freedom, our citizens, our human rights for any perceived economical benefit is not only wrong, it's also completely illogical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this idea of, you know, warming relationships, if they can't even do something so human, so right, and so rational, actually, because there's direct impact to China's reputation and to Hong Kong's economy, keeping my father in there. Yeah. Then what can we expect from that relationship?
But also, crucially, he is a British citizen.
Apologies, Sebastian Lai is, of course, Jimmy Lai's son rather than his brother. Apologies for that error. Ian, are we any further when it comes to Jimmy Lai, do you think, at all?
No, and in fact, one of the speculation was that they might have even chosen Starmer's visit to China as a time to sentence him, because they've convicted him on these bogus charges.
Just tell us, just take it, actually,
could be life imprisonment.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ian, but just take it from first principles. There'll be quite a number of our viewers and listeners, I would imagine, who've maybe heard the name Jimmy Lai, but don't really know the story behind him. Can you just tell us, just in a nutshell, what it's all about?
He's an incredibly brave democracy advocate and publisher in Hong Kong, who's been a thorn in the side of the Chinese Communist Party for years. They target him when they introduced these new security laws in Hong Kong, accused him of colluding with foreign forces. I mean, how Orwellian is that?
Yeah.
They've convicted him that the trial was a sham. They made out that stuff that us ordinary journalists would do as a matter of routine, talking to sources, was somehow criminal. He's been in jail, a lot of it in solitary confinement. He's not a well man at the moment. He's a British citizen. His treatment has been disgraceful, and it is a sign of the sort of contempt with which China holds Britain. And of course, it is a sign of British appeasement that although Starmer says that these issues have been raised, but not as forthrightly as they should be.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly brave individual that deserves much, much more support than he's been given by the British government. He's been convicted. He hasn't yet been sentenced. He could get life imprisonment, which is a death sentence, effectively, for Jimmy Lai. And there was speculation that they were going to make that sentencing this week. I mean, how insulting would that have been at a time when Starmer is in China? So it is terribly important. Starmer says he raised it, but I think the priority of this trip to China has been not to upset the host.
Yeah, and I wonder what goes through President Xi's mind when these things come up, when he hears many international leaders, not just Keir Starmer, but others as well, bringing up things like the case of Jimmy Lai, bringing up the case of the Uyghur Muslims, for example. Does he just sort of say, oh, here we go again, we've got to go through this kind of rigmarole, essentially? Does it really mean anything? And especially when the Chinese look at the UK, I do wonder what they think, what their view is, especially as we are, I would imagine in their view, a much diminished nation for many reasons over the past few years.
I think so. I mean, I think it's performative, and I think they see that way. They recognise that nations will raise these things because they need to. They need to justify themselves to human rights groups, MPs, others at home. They need to be seen to raising these. But China recognises this is perfunctory. It's almost a sideshow to the main meal, the main dish of those visits, which is economic. And they will sit there, and I guess they will nod, they will take notes. They probably do not even engage in serious conversations about it.
Okay. Ian, as always, thank you. Great analyst there, Ian Williams, author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. What do you think about what he said there? 0344 499 1000. Loads more to talk about. We'll talk in just a second as well about Sussex University and anti-reform protest there. We had a reporter on the scene. Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Suze, who says, Peter Blexley says we're in a low-trust society now. Recently, I've seen shoplifters walking out of my local Sainsbury's all the time, unchallenged. I've been going there for 11 years and know the staff by sight, and then me. Last week at the self-checkout, I was flagged up by a till for a search of my shopping. I was offended and only used the manned checkouts now, says Suze. James says, good morning. Could you please put subtitles up when you play a clip of Starmer, as I can't stand listening to that voice? Well, I don't think the subtitles would be too helpful for people listening on the radio, James, but there we are. Lorraine says, when I hear Starmer stating that he always acts in the interest of Britain, I want to vomit, says Lorraine. This vile man who purports to be our Prime Minister is a traitor, in Lorraine's opinion. Chagos giveaway, collapse of the Chinese spy trial, Chinese embassy, freezing the elderly, farmer tax, giving away fishing rights, and the most terrible betrayal of our brave armed forces, all acts of treachery. Well, we will be talking about the armed forces a little bit later on, of course, too, as well. Hi, Cardi P. This is Linda in Worcestershire. Hi, Linda. Great to have your message. Thank you. Acting in the national interest is a nebulous concept for Kowtow Keir. He is a communist, socialist, Marxist and a totalitarian. So he sees China as a model state to emulate, in Linda's opinion. The normal, average Briton does not have that view. So what Kowtow Keir and the Labour Party does is never going to be in the national interest, says Linda. I suppose every Prime Minister thinks they're acting in the national interest, but of course it always accords with their view and perhaps not our view. Very, very interesting survey, more than a third of students believing Reform UK should be banned from speaking at British universities. 35% of undergraduates say that Farage's party should not be able to attend events on campuses, according to a survey conducted for the Higher Education Policy Institute. But listen to this. Nearly half says universities are becoming increasingly less tolerant of a wide range of viewpoints. And the interesting one is that more than 2 in 3, so 69%, agree universities should never limit free speech. Well, maybe you should just listen to a few people who you disagree with. Who knows? You might even be in some way convinced or change your mind. God forbid that should happen. Kieran Galpin is one of our Talk reporters. He's been down at Sussex University, an anti-form protest. We'll see what he has found out and talk to him next here on Talk. Stay with us.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, are taking that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, there are new rules the government has brought in about strengthening free speech of students, academics and external speakers at universities in England. They came in August last year, and universities have got to actively promote academic freedom, ensure campuses are places where robust discussion can take place without fear or censorship. Well, how is that actually working? Because a survey shows that more than a third of students believe that Reform UK, bear in mind, biggest political party in the country, this is a party that is way ahead in many of the polls, looking like the next government of our country. Maybe we should have a chat about what they want to do, especially with our students. Well, more than a third of students believe Reform UK should be banned from speaking at British universities. Some 35% of undergraduates said Nigel Farage's party should not be able to attend events on campuses. This is the survey conducted for the Higher Education Policy Institute. Nearly half, 47%, suggested universities are becoming increasingly less tolerant of a wide range of viewpoints. That's nearly double the proportion 10 years ago. The findings also show that more than 2 in 3 students, 69%, agree universities should never limit free speech. So it's free speech, except if you disagree with me. Well, Kieran Galpin is a talk reporter, and he has been down to Sussex University. Kieran, tell me what you found out.
Well, so basically what's happened over the past couple of weeks, this Reform Society has had death threats online, on social media.
So this is just a group of students who are supporters of Reform UK?
They're just supporters of Reform UK. They've just set up this political society for students. It's newly formed, and when students found out that this society had been formed, they then sent them death threats online on comments on their posts that they'd said that they were going to be setting up this society.
Do we know that it's students that are sending the death threats or other people?
We're not sure. We're not sure. But what also happened was that an anti-fascist group at the university, which is students, set up protests wanting them banned off the university, wanting them kicked out of campus from university. So there's the issue of the death threats, and also there's the issue of them wanting to ban them off the campus.
Well, let's see what you found out. Kieran Galpin went down to Sussex to take a look at the university's free speech culture. This is what he found out.
Over the past couple of weeks, the Reform UK Society, set up for students here at the University of Sussex, have received death threats. Things like they were going to be set on fire, they were going to be jumped, they were going to be egged. Nevertheless, they still ran a stall here today at the Refreshers Fair for the university while protests were going on. In response, the police said the comments were currently under investigation. The officers have liaised with the University of Sussex and safeguarding advice has been provided. Many of the comments and accounts publishing them have subsequently been deleted. But that wasn't enough for the Reform Society here.
They've wanted us banned, they've wanted us silenced, scared off campus. We're not going anywhere. We've just gone into the Refreshers Fair and we've put up a flag, we've shown that we're there. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be doing events over the next few months, showing our faces and actually standing up for what we believe in.
Were you tempted to shut down the Refreshers Fair event in the light of the death threats you received?
Yeah, so for a lot of the time we weren't there because these death threats, I mean, we go to campus, we have to study here. We'll be here for months, years from now. So that's the problem. If we have to always be looking over our shoulders, how can we know that we actually want to do this?
The anti-fascist group who organised the protest released a statement discouraging anyone from speaking to the media. But we did manage to speak with a demonstrator.
Reform goes against everything that this university stands for. It goes against everything that I stand for, and I think it's not fair to other students and vulnerable students to have a organisation that in their manifestos and in their speech and their rhetoric are so outwardly against everything this university is.
Sounds like you don't want people who are right-wing in society.
No, right-wing is fine because we're allowed to have different views and we're allowed to have different opinions. It becomes an issue when your views directly go against the right of people, the right of human rights, the right for asylum, the right for free medicine, the right to believe and love who you want, the right to marry who you want, the right to be a trans person in society, compete in sports that you want.
To keep the society safe, security were deployed at the fair. But after the spate of death threats they received, the Reform Society here are calling for Britain to do more to protect a culture of respectful debate. Kieran Galpin, Talk.
Kieran, seriously, I mean, that is really scary. That, well, good for that person, wholeheartedly disagree with every single word that person said who was talking about how they didn't want right-wing people on campus, but good for them for actually talking to you and giving you an interview. The fact that people are being told don't speak to the media really is quite chilling as well. Clearly this is just one campus, but as we've seen from this polling, there are many campuses where people believe that the same attitude is something that should be encouraged.
Yeah, just going back to that media point, actually, we'd seen posts online saying, don't talk to the media, wear masks so you can't be identified, and also saying things like, the media just want to make fascist propaganda, right? So we were going in, myself and our video journalist here, going in knowing that we were going into a kind of hostile environment, really, where people didn't want to speak to us. And when we did try and interview people, we just got glares and things. So we were glad to get that interview with someone who had been on the demonstration. But yeah, going back to your point about other campuses too, I mean, we saw these stats playing out, these stats that a third don't want Reform UK politicians, but then saying they do also want free speech.
Well, they want free speech, but for people who agree with them. And actually, even the person you spoke to there hasn't got, doesn't accurately understand what Reform UK is about. I love all this nonsense that Reform UK is against gay people, for example. I mean, their chairman is David Bull, who's an openly gay man.
Yeah.
One of the most prominent councillors is Darren Grimes, an openly gay man. I mean, they're not against the LGBT agenda, for example, and that is just a nonsense that people throw at Reform UK all the time. I wonder, Kieran, what you feel you learned from this?
Yeah, I feel I learned the difference between these students who say they believe in free speech and actually whether they believe in it really, because they would say, you know, we do believe in free speech, but as soon as you dug into what that actually meant, even if people were not necessarily extreme, and the people we interviewed actually often were you know, cordial, nice, but the problem was that they did have, in my opinion, dangerous ideas, because they were saying, look, we believe in freedom of speech, but actually if people disagree with us to a sufficient extent, we don't want them on campus.
What's the university been saying?
Yeah, so the university did try and protect freedom of speech. It has been an issue before. They put security at the fair, and they did also release a statement saying after the society got the backlash for setting up. And so the university free speech officer, Professor David Rubain, made this statement, which was released to staff and students, saying that freedom of speech is one of the university's foundational commitments, saying they also have legal and regulatory obligations to uphold freedom of speech and academic freedom, that those who support and advocate for reform or any other UK political party are entitled to do so. Sussex is a place of discussion, debate and disagreement, and as such it is unsurprising that this has led to robust debate within our community. That is as it should be. They go on to say that we are committed to ensuring that diversity in all of its forms, including diversity of thought and belief, can flourish in our community, and we will always respect the right of members of our community to engage in lawful debate and disagreement.
Well, Kieran, that's a really interesting report. I'm sure we'll see much more of you on screen as time goes on, and certainly Sussex just one university where this is clearly a problem. There's lots more to debate in all of this. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Kieran, thank you. That's Kieran Galpin there, our talk reporter. We're going to talk to Graham Stringer in just a second about this Chinese visit, about free speech on campus as well, also about councils facing a revolt over cancelled elections. There are a number of councillors who are actually resigning their roles now because they're so annoyed about what is happening with these cancelled elections, and the unions telling Keir Starmer to resign if local elections go badly. I'll be very interested to hear what Graham Stringer has to say about all of that. We'll get your views too on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Be sure to make the call in the break. I'll see you in just a second here on Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Friday morning. I'm here today until 1 and then tomorrow and Sunday between 10 and 1 as well. Why is Keir Starmer in China? What is the actual benefit from us? Is this all just theatre, and is he in any way making a difference for Britain? He's continuing his visit today. We'll talk to one of his MPs in just a second. Rachel Reeves apparently upset at being sidelined after being dropped from the trip. Also, here at home, councils are facing a revolt over cancelled elections. 30 different councils and a number of councillors very annoyed about all of that too. We'll talk about the BBC as well, told to stop box ticking on diversity. I remember Henry VIII, who was a black man in a wheelchair, except obviously he wasn't. We'll also talk about Iran, loads of different stations ignoring Iran, not talking about it properly. We will of course talk about that. We'll talk about millionaires fleeing as well. You may not be a millionaire, you may not be thinking of fleeing, but them fleeing means less tax, which means our taxes go up, usually anyway. And the veterans are very annoyed about Starmer working with the disgraced lawyer Phil Shiner about 18 years ago. We'll talk about that. That's a story that's rumbling on. Lots of reporting in the papers about that too. Obviously, I want to hear from you. Your voice is as important as mine. In fact, it's even more important because this is my show, but it's your show too. If you want to get your voice on the air, the number is 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, if you would, to the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp text message to the main number, or you can give me a ring on the main number. That main number is, of course, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, just a reminder, I'm here tomorrow on Sunday between 10 and 1. We've got some great political guests, and actually we are going to be speaking to Andrew Rossendale as well from Reform UK. We'll be talking to him. He's one of the latest defectees, of course. He has gone there, as has Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman as well. Keir Starmer is in China still. He's in Shanghai. Donald Trump has been commenting on that. This is what the president said.
President, what do you think about the UK getting into business with China? Keir Starmer is in Beijing.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China.
Talking about the UK and Canada as well, Mark Carney, of course, is the Prime Minister of Canada, former Governor of the Bank of England here in the UK as well. They're cozying up to China. Keir Starmer says, actually, the trip is in our national interest. This is what the Prime Minister said.
The relationship is in a good place, a strong place, and what I'd say to everybody here is that I always act in our national interest, and therefore the question for me is how does this accelerate and deliver back at home? I know that whatever's going on in the world, the most important thing to the vast majority of people is the cost of living. So opening up access to business, opportunities, seizing those opportunities, which then gets reflected in better businesses, in jobs, in price reductions at home, really, really matter. And so we made real progress on all of those areas.
Well, Graham Stringer is a Labour MP for Blakely and Middleton South. Graham, good to talk to you this morning. How are you doing?
Okay, thanks. And you?
Yes, very well, thank you. What is the point of this China trip, do you think? Do you think there's any real tangible benefit? We know that there are the tariffs on Scotch whisky, for example, going down from 10% to 5%. We know that visa-free travel has been extended and that people will benefit from that. To me, that doesn't seem huge when you look at what the Chinese have got out of us. What do you think?
I think it's slightly worse than that. I mean, I think you have to have a deep think about what our relationship is to a major power who are committing genocide in West China, who are clearly constantly attacking us in hyperspace. And we should be prepared to sell goods to them and buy goods. I think the paying too much respect to them, which this trip represents, is a mistake. I don't believe we should have given the huge Chinese embassy planning permission.
Was it a mistake, Graham, for Keir Starmer to go to China?
Yes.
Why?
Well, for the reasons I've just given. I don't think we have thought through what our relationship should be with somebody committing, a country committing genocide. When you think of all the rhetoric that has been about Gaza, and you can argue what's happening there and what the definition of genocide is, there is no doubt that the Uyghurs are being sterilized and eliminated in West China. And going and shaking hands and saying we're good friends and our relationship is improving in that situation, I think is wrong. But they're also attacking us. Do you know how much we spend protecting this country in hyperspace, cyberspace, I should say? It's about £15 billion pounds, and it's not just China; it's Russia, North Korea, and for all I know, Iran. But we're spending a great deal of money. They're costing us a fortune.
So what should our relationship with China? What should our relationship with China actually be then? What should the Prime Minister do, and how can he show perhaps not strength, because that's very difficult against China, but at least some resilience and some robustness when it comes to the UK?
Well, I don't think we should have given planning permission to this mega embassy. I mean, I feel particularly strongly about this as a Manchester MP when in the local consulate here people were dragged off the street for protesting about them and quite severely beaten up. So I think our relationship should be cold and businesslike in trading where we have to. And also, I mean, the Chinese have partly grown their economy by stealing intellectual property. I think in the long term, we should be saying that China was accepted back into the international community some years ago, and they've not played the game. They've cheated in the World Trade Organization, they've cheated in the World Health Organization. They are not playing by the rules, and I think we have to separate them out, where, when necessary, if we want to buy their goods or they want to buy us, I don't say we should not trade with them, but we should do it in an open-eyed way and not get cheated.
Just on the point that Keir Starmer did bring up, apparently, the case of Jimmy Lai, his son spoke to my colleague Julia Hartley-Brewer yesterday. Let's just remind ourselves of just a small portion of that interview, and then I'll get Graham's thoughts on that.
So this idea that we would trade our freedom, our citizens, our human rights, for any perceived economical benefit is not only wrong, it's also completely illogical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this idea of, warming relationships, if they can't even do something so human, so right, and so rational, actually, because there's direct impact to China's reputation and to Hong Kong's economy, keeping my father in there. Then what can we expect from that relationship?
But also, crucially, he is a British citizen.
She's right, and he's right as well. Sebastian Lai there, Jimmy Lai's son. We know that Keir Starmer brought this up, but Jimmy Lai will still be sentenced. He will probably spend quite a long time in a Chinese prison. What should be done about that case, and was this a missed opportunity, Graham?
I think it was. I mean, if China are going to benefit in PR terms from this visit, which they possibly are, then I think he should have gone harder, not just on the human rights of people being murdered in West China, but a British citizen who's being imprisoned for really trying to defend the agreement we came to with China when Hong Kong was handed over in 1999, I think it was. So he's not done enough on those areas. Sometimes dealing with bad regimes, you can get benefits. When I was leader of Manchester City Council, we had a friendship agreement with Leningrad, which the Jewish community objected to very strongly. But we managed to help get a number of Jewish people out of the then Soviet Union. So you can make it work, even if it's a bad regime. But it doesn't seem to have had any positive product.
Turning to events here in the UK, we know that a number of unions, including the Fire Brigades Union, about 15 of them, have told Keir Starmer to resign if the local elections in May go badly. Do you agree with them?
I think that Labour MPs, Labour Party members, affiliated trade unions will have to have a very serious discussion if the local elections go as badly as they look as though they're going at the present time. So the government isn't doing as well as I hoped it would do. There are problems. We have to have a discussion whether that's down to the whole of the cabinet, whether it's down to the leadership, what it is. Is it the fact that we're not having the real debate about what needs to change for the benefit of the country, which hopefully then, if we made those decisions, we would do better in elections.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. And I see now some councillors who are actually resigning or threatening to resign over these elections that have been cancelled, about 30 of them, and some suggestion anyway that some councils were lent on to postpone or cancel the elections. What do you make of this controversy, Graham?
It's embarrassing. I said that on the floor of the House of Commons. I joined the Labour Party because I believed it was in favour of democracy, redistribution, a number of other things. When you find out that it appears not to believe as strongly as I think it should in those things, then I'm embarrassed. I spent nearly 20 years in local government as a councillor. I have to tell you that there are times when it got tough, you wish there weren't elections, but you have to go. That's the deal.
Yes, yes.
If you want to make decisions on behalf of people, you have to have their permission by them voting for you. I mean, I thought one of the cabinet ministers said these people should be getting on with fixing holes in the road. The reason you can get on with fixing holes in the road is because people have chosen you to do that job as a local councillor. He completely missed the point.
I wonder, we've had a report just a little bit earlier on in the programme. I don't expect you to necessarily have seen it. I know you're very busy, Graham, but Kieran Galpin, our reporter, talked about, interviewed various people at Sussex University, but this is happening right throughout the country, where a third of students believe Reform UK should be banned from universities. Now, Sussex University itself says, look, we believe in free speech, we want people to have all sorts of different opinions. And actually, if you look at 10 years ago, about 24% of students believed universities were becoming increasingly less tolerant. Now it's about half. That's gone up. Do you believe free speech is under pressure in this country? And I know you're not a supporter of Reform UK, of course you're Labour through and through, Graham, but nonetheless, presumably you want a diversity of opinion at our universities.
Yeah, after one of these debates just over 12 months ago, I decided to join the Free Speech Union. And that is an organisation that campaigns, it helps represent people who are not allowed to speak or who are being prosecuted for using what they believe to be was their right to freedom of speech. And it's quite shocking. I don't know about the case in Sussex University, but it is happening all over the country, as you say. And what's even more surprising, the universities where the threat seems to be biggest, so our universities with the best international reputation. Oxford, Cambridge and Durham. I mean, you would expect them to be in the vanguard of protecting free speech. They're at the other end of the train, really. I am shocked by it, but I write articles occasionally and do what I can to enhance freedom of speech, or protect it is perhaps a better word.
Graham, thank you for that. Your freedom of speech exercised on this station is welcome anytime. That's Graham Stringer MP, the Labour MP for Blakely and Middleton South. Karen in Bournemouth has been listening to that. And Karen, you saw Kieran's report there a little bit earlier on. What do you think about freedom of speech, especially at our universities? You're very welcome to the programme, and thanks for ringing 0344 499 1000. What do you think?
Well, good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
I think that we're being far too lily-livered about most of this stuff. I think one of the things that we should tighten up on is the idea that you can wear masks at demonstrations at university or anywhere, to be honest. I think students found to be demonstrating and threatening should be immediately expelled, and I think the university...
But hold on, that's not very democratic, is it, if you're expelling them if they're demonstrating? Surely that's their free speech they're exercising.
There's demonstration, you know, you can stand there with a placard.
Yep.
But there's threatening that's
Yeah, we don't want that. You're absolutely right, Karen.
It's a very lily-livered statements from these universities as well, you know, oh, we believe in free speech. But I think the universities themselves should be, you know, when you've got things like that going on, they should be sanctioned. And it's not just a little fine or something, but they should be sanctioned to the extent that it actually threatens the fact that they could, you know, remain open. Because we've got plenty of universities doing really silly courses anyway. It's, you know, the whole idea...
Well, it's important to have free speech there, and even, especially indeed, for people who disagree with us. But Karen, listen, thank you. I agree with a lot of what you said there. Luke has been in touch. Said, good morning, Peter. Luke from Blackburn here. I can't believe the hypocrisy of the anti-reform protesters at universities. We believe in free speech for everyone, except for those who don't agree with us. Brainwashed, moronic hypocrisy at its worst, says Luke. Sue in West Sussex says these thousands of naive students with no life experience as yet need to spend a couple of years living in China, North Korea or Russia. Then they might begin to understand how fortunate they are to live in a Western democracy. Hopefully one day they will start to grow up, says Sue. Andy in Cheddar says, I wonder if that student who assumed without foundation that reform is against trans and gay rights would also ban Islam from campus. Phil says it's shocking that the so-called anti-fascists are actually the fascists. That is often the case. And Stephen Millings in Belfast says students who refuse their obligation to honour free speech should have their grants removed. Let's see how quickly their opinion changes, says Stephen in Belfast. Loads to discuss on all of this. If you have thoughts on it, give me a shout on 0344 499 1000. We'll talk as well about the BBC told to stop box-ticking casting that shoehorns ethnic minority actors into period dramas. Lots to discuss with Roger Bolton in just a second, and with you too. As I say, 0344 499 1000. Be great to hear from you between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, are taking that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to so many people who have sent tweets in. I've just been having a look at some of those during the break. Sandy says, Peter, you've just played a clip of Starmer saying he understands the most important thing to the British people is the cost of living and that he's dealing with that. A, our most important concern is illegal migration. B, he says it's the day after the water companies say they're putting up our bills by a minimum of 5.4% in April again, and the day after he's denied compensation to the WASPy women. Does he think we're stupid? Phil Goodfellow says Starmer is in China for one reason and one reason only, to suck up to his Chinese masters, in Phil's opinion. Another person says it's all about UK Labour's choices, tax-paying Brits always the bottom of the pile. Angela says, what happened to disagreeing without being disagreeable? Reform UK have many gay people, Muslims, Christians and others working together in harmony. These students do not practice freedom of speech. Well, that's a very good point, Angela. And another one from this person says, Starmer had money to give away Shagos, but no money for the WASPy women. And Lady Anne says, most Prime Ministers think they're dealing in the country's best interest. Wise up. Most have been dealing in their own interest, including the present one. And just finally, for the meantime, Amy says, why do Keir Starmer, Lord Hermer and others dislike our veterans so much? First it was the Northern Ireland veterans with the Troubles Bill, now this story about Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. These veterans kept us and our country safe. And London Oil Trader says, what did the Chinese super embassy get the UK? What did Starmer get? Well, all these questions will continue to being asked. What I want to do now is talk a little bit about the BBC, because it's been told to stop box-ticking casting that shoehorns ethnic minority actors into period dramas. This is, for example, an adaptation of Great Expectations with a mixed-race actress playing Estella, despite the story taking place in the early to mid-19th century. A mixed-race person playing Sir Isaac Newton on the 60th anniversary episode of Doctor Who. Well, there are lots of aliens and strange people who don't exist anyway, so I'm less concerned perhaps about that. But one thing that is of interest is Agatha Christie novel Murder is Easy, 2023 adaptation, which had anti-colonial struggles alongside the country house murder. Well, Roger Bolton is with us, former BBC executive. Roger, good to talk to you as always. What do you make of this? Has the BBC got a case to answer here? And what should it do? Because it's got to reflect the licence fee payer, but not unrealistically.
No, I agree with all of that. But what I think you should be fair about what the report says, which is a very intelligent and interesting report. It says, and I quote, it was a survey of 4,500 adults. A third of those polled said the BBC tried too hard to represent different groups, but it was slightly outweighed by those who think it's doing a good job. Okay. So it's not true to say the BBC is told by everybody. It's not.
No, I'm not saying it's everybody, but it's certainly been told by some of those people. Do they have a point, Roger?
They do have a point, but I think what we've got to recognise is this. We're such a different country depending where you are. You're from Northern Ireland and you know how Metro London-centric you probably think programming is. People in Scotland feel the same. Mm-hmm. Often Wales, say in Cornwall. I certainly felt it coming from Cumbria. Then you've got people who live in the middle of cities who have multi-ethnic surroundings, every day meeting people, different colours, whatever. They expect their world to be represented. You go to Norfolk, East Norfolk, where you won't see probably anything but white faces, and they think, what's this country you're portraying? So there's a real issue here of how you deal with it. Now, I share some of the concerns. They raise in the review the question of the Shetland series, which is on BBC One, which I really enjoy, but has a laughably disproportionate number of non-white figures in senior positions in the police force there. So I think there's a real issue there. But on the other hand, it would be crazy to represent London and the South East without having very large numbers.
And I totally get that. And there's no issue, of course, with this. The problem is when it does become tick box, it wasn't the BBC, it was actually another broadcaster that is doing a series about the law. And I know one particular person who was told to her face, well, we already have a white woman in her 40s for this particular role in this series, therefore we don't need you. And that's not unique. Sometimes people are far more open about it perhaps than they should be, but the fact is that there is something of a tick box culture when it comes to guests, for example, in various programs where they want a diversity, and that's fine to represent the nation. I totally agree with you. When it comes to one drama, and I can't even remember it was a BBC drama, but I know that Henry VIII, for example, was a black man in a wheelchair. Well, I mean, we know that Henry VIII was not disabled. We know that he wasn't black, and that to me is preposterous.
I agree. There's a difficulty with historical issues. Although let's not forget that one of Laurence Olivier's greatest roles was blacking up as Othello. But anyway,
which would never happen these days.
Yeah, I know, but it was. Let's just remember all that.
Sure.
I think there is a distinction when you're representing history and you're dealing with something and you put a black face, say, on Henry VIII. Well, it's damaging actually to the drama because a significant amount of the audience will say, this is ridiculous. I think you have to make a distinction between fiction, generally, contemporary situations, fantasies and whatever, and the general push to get people of very different backgrounds is a very good thing. The push to get more drama made out of London is a very good thing. I would argue that where you come from in Northern Ireland, one of the persistent problems in the Troubles and elsewhere was the lack of interest of the broadcasters and politicians at the heart about what was going on in your community. So unless you said to the BBC said, as it did do actually, you must make a series out of Northern Ireland. You know, a lot of people in London say, please, come on, where are the actors? What can we do? Well, we know what's happened as a consequence. But so many American Netflix series are shot over there and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there is a very thriving industry there, and you look at things like Blue Lights, for example, which has been an incredibly...
It didn't happen by accident. It happened by a decision at the centre in which we need to represent all our communities. Now, I think, broadly, the BBC does that. I think it gets it wrong when it does Shetland, for example. I think it gets wrong when it tries to represent Henry VIII in that way. But the other thing you've got to remember, and the report does reflect, there are a lot of brilliant actors there, brilliant people, non-white actors. And are we saying to them, you can't play that role because you're not the right colour? And also,
I don't actually. Let's just talk for a second about that point, because I don't think we should obviously say that. That's not the case. But Rod Liddle wrote an excellent column in The Spectator last week where he said, look, there are so many predetermined outcomes. You talk about, for example, the senior black women, for example, in the police. Well, we know there are some, but they're very little, so they're very few, so they're probably overrepresented. But the villain, in Rod Liddle's opinion anyway, you may disagree with this, or maybe you've seen other dramas which don't bear this out. He says you can almost tell that the villain will be a middle-class white person. And I mean, that was his opinion. It was expressed in The Spectator. But we do see this from time to time in many different dramas, contemporary things that I'm talking about now, where...
There is a danger. No, I agree with you, Peter, but there is danger. But Rod only looks for what he's looking for, doesn't he? It's like, I would say, coming from a Christian background, too often the Christianity is, represented by strange evangelical people.
Well, I agree with you, and I think
we all have. Yeah, but we all have.
But it's true. But what you've just said there is true, because there are things that are said. Comedians, for example, will often talk about, oh, for goodness sake, those people, fairy stories, and Christmas is a fairy story, and Christians and all the rest of it. I'm not a Christian. I am from a Christian background. I grew up. My family is quite a Christian family. But there are things that are criticised, for example, about Christianity, about Judaism and other faiths that would never be said about Sikhism or would never be said about Islam, for example. And we've got to be equal in all of this.
I agree, absolutely. But to be equal, you have to report, you have to be aware of, you have to be better educated. We all need to be better educated about the changing nature of this country. And the problem with Rod Liddle and other people like that is they look for one thing and they find it. They don't look at the other things that are there because they're not looking for them.
Well, we're all subjective to some degree, Roger, but yes, certainly.
We are inevitable. But the other thing is, let's all remember, when we're talking about this, it's not just about race, it's also about sex. Let's remember, in all of Shakespeare's plays, every woman was played by a young boy or a teenager. Right? There were no women allowed on stage effectively until about 1660. So, whenever you talk about this, you've got to remember, hold on, there's an evolution going on.
Yeah.
And in a society like ours, which tries and has to, and a broadcaster whose job is to represent all parts of the public, you've got to represent that. And sometimes they get ahead of everybody else, sometimes they go too far. But actually, this very report says that most people think the BBC is broadly getting it right, and quite a lot of people think they're getting it wrong. That's not surprising in a country like we are.
Roger, thank you very much Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. No, the sneeze has gone away. Roger Bolton, thank you very much indeed. That's former BBC executive Roger Bolton. I once went to see a play where I think there were 8 people playing Jane Austen. One of them, of course, was a gay man and the other was a black woman. And I just thought, none of you are really representing Jane Austen here. But nonetheless, I stayed for the whole of the play, which doesn't always happen, although I don't think there was an interval. Anyway, we will talk in just a second to Israel's Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism, Senior Policy and Strategy Advisor, and a former member of the Knesset, actually, about Britain banning Iran's Revolutionary Guards. It's about time this happened. We know that other countries have done it as well. And about Israel and Hamas finally agreeing on the Gaza death toll. Lots to discuss in all of that. Lots of calls coming in as well. We'll make sure we get to them as soon as possible. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the Israelis have just said that in accordance with a ceasefire agreement in the Middle East, that the Rafah crossing is going to open on Sunday in both directions for the limited movement of people. It's been closed for some time. Exit from and entry into the Gaza Strip via the Rafah crossing will be permitted in coordination with Egypt, following prior security clearance of individuals by Israel and under the supervision of the EU mission, similar to the mechanism in 2025. The return of residents, the Israelis say, from Egypt to the Gaza Strip will be permitted in coordination with Egypt for residents who left Gaza during the course of the war only, and only after the prior security clearance by Israel, in addition to initial identification and screening by Rafah crossing by the EU mission. An additional screening and identification process will be conducted at a designated corridor. So we do see the progress certainly happening in the agreement, and actually Israel and Hamas finally agreeing on a Gaza death toll, but no agreement on how many terrorists were killed. Well, Michelle Cutler-Wunsch is with me now, Israel's Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism, a Senior Policy and Strategy Director and a former member of the Knesset. Loads to discuss this morning. Lovely to have you in the studio. What do you make of these moves, certainly in the Middle East?
I'll just say, former Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism, current Chief Executive of the International Legal Forum, and we'll get right into it.
Apologies we didn't get that right.
Good.
We'll get it right the next time, Michelle.
It's all good. Look, we have to be very, very clear. First of all, and your viewers should know, the humanitarian aid has not been deterred in any way throughout the duration of the war, actually almost since 2023, the October 7 massacre, because that comes in, flows in regularly. What you've just referred to is actually human beings seeking to return to Gaza. And in that sense, it would be interesting to note that those that return to Gaza are still considered refugees, although they call it a home, their home. They are returning to Gaza, but in fact what they want to continue doing is their war to return to the State of Israel proper. So if this were actually going to be this path forward, we'll say a peaceful path forward, what I would actually expect the EU mission that you've mentioned will be there to make sure is all those returning to Gaza are actually going to revoke their refugee status. By the way, the single group of refugees ever in the history of post-World War II era that passed down refugee status from generation to generation to generation. So we now have 5th and 6th generation refugees returning to what they actually view as their home in Gaza. That EU mission can actually do something very meaningful now and say, you have returned home, i.e. you're no longer refugees and don't need the services of UNRWA, which we can discuss a little bit more in detail.
Well, a deeply awful organisation, and I interviewed one of their spokesmen a few weeks ago. It didn't go hugely well for him, it must be said. Let's talk about Iran just for a second and the Revolutionary Guard. I mean, it's just, this has been a long time coming, and the UK will say, oh, isn't it marvellous, we're finally prescribing them. Why they don't prescribe them, why they haven't prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood as well, I don't know. It's just taken such a long time. Finally, the UK is catching up, and we know that the regime in Iran, a large part of that is the Revolutionary Guard, of course, oppressing its people, diminishing the status of people, stopping their free speech, stopping their freedom of assembly, being horrendous to women, for example. It does slightly ask the two questions I suppose I would ask you is, why do you think it's taken the UK so long? And secondly, on the streets of London, we've had a lot of people who've been very pro-Gaza, pro-human rights, they say, pro-freedom of speech. Where are they? They don't seem to be out.
So here it is. You know, the irony of ironies and the many, many masks that were brutally removed in the 2 years of responses to the October 7 massacre, and actually their mirror in what has been the past few weeks of slaughter of the people of Iran by a criminal Islamic regime, of which the IRGC is the long arm. I'll say not only internal aggression, violence, torture, execution of the people of Iran, but transnational aggression around the world, targeting what we know of as attempts to murder individuals, citizens of other countries. That is the IRGC now. The EU has finally, as you know, designated that IRGC
after... It was yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yesterday, after France and Spain, I believe, and a few others actually blocked that listing of what is a terror organization alongside ISIS, alongside Hamas, alongside others that are prescribed terror organizations, and a very long time coming, as you said, the UK too should have actually just stated the obvious. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. This is a genocidal terror organization of which we should be very clear that criminal Islamic regime in Iran has only been emboldened through the duration of years that resisted listing it as such and treating it as such, emboldening genocidal terror and tyranny, openly declaring its intent. And right here in the streets of London, as you've said, with the butcher of Tehran being carried in the alleged pro-Palestinian rallies, which at the time when we spoke, I said, if those were pro-Palestinian rallies, they would be holding up signs that would say, free Gaza from Hamas.
Yeah, absolutely.
As free the people of Yemen from the Houthis, free the people of Lebanon from the Hezbollah, and free the people of Iran from the criminal Islamic regime in Iran. Instead, holding up signs right here in London, but also in Sydney, Australia, in Toronto, Canada, the butcher of Tehran held up on signs that say the right side of history. Choose the right side of history. Now, if we are not connecting the dots to the silence that we've seen around the world by alleged human rights warriors, champions, organizations, individuals, countries, and the UN itself, that has not prescribed the IRGC, by the way, then we are failing to understand what it is that we need to be very wary of, and that is the collapse of the post-World War II international rules-based order. Look, we just marked 81 years to what we know of as the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Right here in the UK, the BBC sort of forgetting that that was about the murder, not of 6 million people, the Holocaust, but about the murder of 6 million Jews. The problem is not just the erasure of Jews from public spaces, from academic spaces, from the streets. The problem is that when you erase the Jew, and there are only about less than 16 million Jews in the entire world, what you also
Still not
erase...
as many of them in the world as there were before the at the end of the Holocaust. That's still, the population still hasn't recovered 81 years on.
Indeed. But what every single person should know is what you've done when you've erased the Jew is you've erased the world's early warning sign, of what it is that threatens, in the words of the late Chief Rabbi Sachs right here in the UK, what threatens humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference. That is what we're experiencing, and we are facing this with a continued, what I would call the first Iran war, that not only was launched on October the 7th with the massacre of 1,200 people and the abduction of 251, the last of whom was returned just last week for burial, 2 days ago for burial, but in fact in the responses of the international community that have failed to recognize the rising threat of extremism that anti-Semitism is just the siren for.
One element of the international community that has realized that is the United States. They've deployed drones to survey Iran. Should they take military action, in your opinion?
Look, we have been under attack by either Iran itself directly in what's known as the 12-day war, and I should share with you that existential threat has never felt so real, and in the 2 years, as I said, since October 7th massacre, by Iran's proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. It hasn't stopped for one moment for us. The war has been raging, what I would call that multi-front war, 7 conventional war fronts, and 1 unconventional front, the one that we've just spoken about, a war for hearts and minds that has been raging, that has actually emboldened the criminal Islamic regime in Iran to recognize that it has a carte blanche to destroy the state of Israel, as it openly declares its intent to do. So when you ask me, the immediate response, of course, is we know that we will be the first line of attack, as Israel is, as the Jewish nation state is, the first line of attack of this genocidal regime. But what we also know is there is no peace possible with those that not only are hell-bent on attacking the weak, but are attacking their own people, who's in their freedom, as if they're fighting for freedom, they are, as I said before, torturing, executing, slaughtering the people of Iran.
And all of that is true, but just to get back to the question, what should the Americans do?
I would say it's not just the Americans. I would say that the U.S. is in the lead of what should be allies that are defending democracy. Should they be attacking the regime, for example? Well, the regime has not only slaughtered its own people, but has tried to murder, as I said, in transnational aggression.
So would you welcome attacks?
You know, you ask that to an Israeli who knows what the implication is for us. And it's not something that I can say so sort of easily, because I understand what the implication of war is. But in order for there to be peace, there can be no peace with regimes like this. In an axis of evil, if we quote Churchill's words to Chamberlain, right? You were given the choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you will have war. We are in the midst of what I would describe as an axis of evil that is at war on our shared civilization, that it is at war on our shared democracies. Now, few have actually awakened to this, and the United States is in the process of understanding and deciding how it is that it'll proceed. I don't see this regime as one that you can move, appease, if you will, and move towards some sort of a peaceful resolution when it openly declares its intent, in fact, to build on the rubble of our civilization an alternate reality on which none of us want to live alongside an axis of evil. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Qatar, Turkey, Muslim Brotherhood ideology that openly declares its intent to destroy the foundations of democracies that we cherish. Muslim
Brotherhood, another organisation that should absolutely be prescribed here in the UK and isn't. Michelle Cutler-Wunsch, thank you so much. You're a former member of the Knesset. Give us your proper job title as well.
I'm the Chief Executive of the International Legal Forum.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Lots to discuss on all of that. Let me know what your thoughts are. 0344 499 1000. In just a minute, we're going to be talking about why so many millionaires are leaving the UK. There's a new report out about that. And of course, you might say, well, will we miss them? Well, you certainly will when the tax bill goes up yet again. We're taxed at the highest level since we have been in the modern era, certainly since the end of the Second World War. So it's a really good discussion worth having, and discuss what Michelle has been saying as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That Rachel Reid, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody who's been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls in just a second, but there's some breaking news now, and that's that a Sudanese asylum seeker, Deng Choi Majek, has been jailed at Coventry Crown Court for life with a minimum of 29 years for murdering the hotel worker Rhiannon White. That was on a railway station in Walsall. Passing sentence at Coventry Crown Court, Mr Justice Sewell said the Sudanese national had acted with a chilling composure in every aspect of your behaviour when he killed the 27-year-old in October 2024. We know that Rhiannon White died 3 days after Majek stabbed her 23 times with a screwdriver at that train station in Walsall. Her mother said she wasn't just my daughter, she was my best friend. She called her sister called Rhiannon White the best of us. Majek is a Sudanese national who arrived in the UK on a small boat less than 3 months before the attack. He was living at a hotel where Rhiannon White worked, and this was just an absolutely horrendous, brutal, and awful murder. And we know that the sentence for murder is imprisonment for life, said the judge, setting his minimum term to 29 years. And that is the breaking news that the Sudanese asylum seeker Deng Choi Majek, who was here for less than 3 months before he murdered Rhiannon White by stabbing her with a screwdriver, he has been jailed at Coventry Crown Court for life with a minimum of 29 years. Right then, I want to talk about people leaving this country. This is millionaires on the move. The UK bracing for historic wealth flight as global migration peaks. And we hear that immigration and people coming to this country, the net migration number is coming down a little bit. But some of that, at least, in fact, a fair proportion of it, is people who are leaving because they don't like the tax regime, they don't like the cost of living in this country. They're often moving to places like Dubai. You're talking about millionaires, yes, but you're also talking about young people as well who perhaps want to get in the housing ladder, are looking at a better remunerated life in somewhere like Dubai, and they are then moving there for a short time or a few years and then coming back. But the millionaires are what this report is about. And Michael Simmons is the economics editor of The Spectator, who is that rare beast, Michael, that can take complex economic data and translate it into English for people like me who got a B in GCSE maths. Michael, just tell us what's happening here and why it's happening.
Well, it's a bit of a tricky thing to understand in the data here, because there's actually two things going on at once. So on the one hand, as you say, net migration is coming down because emigration from the UK is going up. But actually, the bulk of that number is not what we might think straight away. It's not actually, Brits fleeing the UK. It appears to be Boris wave people, migrants that came in sort of 2021, actually deciding to go home. And I think that's something that's not been picked up
Very interesting.
Yet.
Okay.
However, beside that, you're completely right to say that there is this phenomenon of this millionaire exodus. And it was estimated that last year, 16,500 dollar millionaires left the UK, more than any other country. Now, that group is small enough that you don't see them in the official migration figures, but they're big enough to make a difference to the tax take, because the top 1% of earners in this country, as you know, earn something like, pay something like 28% of all income tax. So even though this exodus isn't enough to appear in the migration figures, you know, as Brits alone, it's enough to really hamper the taxman.
Yes, and certainly there will be people who just say, oh, well, you know, millionaires, they can do whatever they like. But actually they can, because they have what money gives you is choice, doesn't it? And actually, if you want to move somewhere else, and so much is highly mobile, there are people who can do their jobs, sometimes jobs that are based in the UK, but they do them elsewhere. I have a friend, for example, who works for an Irish firm that does work in continental Europe, but he lives in London, and most of the work he does is from Zoom, or they have a little satellite office there. This is just something that's becoming bigger and bigger, isn't it? And the sort of difference between something that was actually written about in The Spectator some years ago about the somewheres and the anywheres, the people who are tied to somewhere geographically, versus people who can really work anywhere. And the more money you have, the more likely you are to have that kind of freedom.
Well, exactly. You're completely right. And, you know, Britain is not a country that makes things anymore. This is a service economy, and there's many benefits to that. But one of the pitfalls is, as you say, services can be provided basically anywhere. So it's easy for people to flitter in here and flitter out. And obviously, you've pointed to tax as being one of the reasons why, you know, young people, you increasingly do see them appearing in the figures in Australia and Dubai. And then the mega rich, the kind of non-doms, are leaving here. The actual tax being too high is one of it. But another aspect that gets kind of quoted, if you speak to these people, or if you speak to the firms that represent wealthy individuals, and they mention all the time, is not just the tax take, it's how frequently we have these U-turns and changes. I mean, a lot of wealthy people don't actually mind coming to Britain and paying much higher tax than they would pay in Dubai or in Texas, because they enjoy living in Britain. They enjoy, you know, what the amazing things about this country. But what they want to do is to be able to plan their finances on sort of a 10, 20-year time frame.
Well, you want a bit of stability, and that's what's been sorely lacking in our political and economic system for such a long time. Michael, as always, thank you for decoding all of that. Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. Let's speak to Stephen in the Lake District. Stephen, I understand you've had a successful business. What are your thoughts about the economic situation?
Basically, it's absolutely appalling. I'm 51, so I've been in business since I was in my late teens. My father, grandfather before me, so it's a third generational company, and I've now got my own children involved. I've never ever known the difficulties that we go through in relation to the cost of staff, taxes, employing people, all the red tape, the hoops we have to jump through. It literally is that stressful, dealing with things that it prevents you from growing your businesses or pushing forward.
Do you think this government, maybe you think about the last government as well, but particularly this government, do you think they get business? Do they understand when they implement, you know, making tax digital, where you've got to pay tax 4 times a year, national insurance rises, that means that it costs £3,600 to employ a 21-year-old to bring them on, minimum wage going up, that may or may not affect your business, but all these different things, Stephen, that are happening. And what's the sort of net result of this? What are you kind of thinking? Are you thinking maybe the time has come to go?
Completely. I've written to Keir Starmer multiple times to ask him why we should stay. We've worked extremely hard, taken a lot of risks, gone through very difficult times over 75 years. And why should we continue to stay in the UK, pay the taxes that we're paying, which is hundreds and hundreds, if not millions of pounds a year, and we get nothing back for it.
And that's my point. And I asked this question on a number of occasions, Stephen, and I've never got a convincing answer. What is the benefit? What is the, you know, you look at so many stories we're talking about today, not just the economy, we're talking about shoplifting as well, where we heard an example of someone being rewarded for giving stuff back. Very few convictions for things like rape, for example. What is the benefit for obeying the law, doing the right thing, paying your taxes, creating wealth as you're doing, creating jobs as your family has done for generations? You must just feel like a slap in the face at the end of every month.
Completely. It's like my father would always say, the light has been turned off at the end of the tunnel. There's nothing to look forward to. And this government have absolutely no idea how businesses operate and run. They're clueless, utterly clueless. I've never, ever experienced anything like it.
So from your perspective as a businessman, are you thinking of leaving? Could you leave?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been weighing up multiple options. My youngest child's 14 years old. That's the only reason I'm still here.
Right. Your kid's education, not consistency?
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, I'm weighing it all the time. I've got friends, anybody that's been successful in my lifetime that I've known or grown up with, a massive percentage of them have now left or looking to leave the UK.
Where have they gone and what have they done?
America, Dubai, Portugal, Mallorca. They've gone to various different places for their own personal and different reasons. But those are the sorts of places that they've looked at
if you left right now, Stephen, imagine your 14-year-old was 18, maybe going to university, or maybe it's a few years' time from now and things don't get better. What would you do? Or you've looked at different options, but what's the most likely thing that you would do and why? Would it be tax-related or what would it be?
Yeah, definitely tax related, and obviously tax does take a big portion of your wages now.
Of course.
But also it's having belief that this country can become better, and like I said before, the light seems to have been turned off at the end of the tunnel.
And that's depressing, isn't it? When you're working day in, day out to make money, to make a success of a business, you want to know that it has a purpose rather than simply funding huge taxation.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, my father was a huge Churchill fan. We were brought up in a good middle-class working family. We've pushed through to come, to do very, very well. And it seems like everything we fought for and believed in, from what our grandparents, taught us, and there's just no belief in the UK.
Stephen, we just got to leave it there because the news is coming up. But I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. Really, really interesting to hear from Stephen in the Lake District. I wonder if you're feeling the same way, whether you're a millionaire or whether you're on a better salary. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 12 o'clock, some breaking news now on Talk, and that is that China has agreed to lift sanctions on British MPs and peers with immediate effect. There are 5 MPs and 2 members of the House of Lords who were, until a few moments ago, banned from going to China. That has now been lifted, so people like Ian Duncan-Smith and Tom Tugendhat can return if they want to. I think it's unlikely they would do so, but nonetheless, that has been lifted. So there is a tangible benefit to Keir Starmer's visit to China. We're talking about that and what you think about Sir Kowtow Starmer. That's what some of the papers are calling, and actually the Daily Mail saying, is that it in regard to what he's got? Well, he's now got these sanctions lifted on Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Nusrat Ghani, Tom Tugendhat, Neil O'Brien and Tim Loughton. Tim Loughton no longer in Parliament, were amongst those who were targeted. Baroness Kennedy and Lord Alton, also members of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance in China, were also sanctioned. We'll get the latest on that. We'll get instant reaction from Trevor Kavanagh, the former political editor of The Sun. There's also that horrendous news about the asylum seeker. Well, good news in that he's been sentenced, but a horrendous case. The asylum seeker sentenced to a minimum of 29 years for stabbing a hotel worker to death in a railway station in West Midlands. We'll talk in the West Midlands. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the union saying that Keir Starmer should go if there is a bad election for him. We'll also talk about people being assaulted on campus. A campaigner who was assaulted and attacked and arrested during a university debate will talk to us. Veterans as well. You know, that's a story I cover a lot, about veterans and what they think about what this government is doing. Many have attacked Starmer for working with the disgraced lawyer Phil Shiner, and former Army chiefs firing another broadside at the Prime Minister. As always, I want to talk to you, whether it's about reform on campus, we talked about that earlier, about diversity in the BBC, about free speech, whatever you want to talk about today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll get some of those on the air between now and 1 o'clock. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk. And just a reminder, I'm back tomorrow and Sunday between 10 and 1. Andrew Rossendale will be my guest tomorrow at 10 o'clock, so you can tune in for that. And if you have anything you want to ask the Reform UK defector, feel free to text those in now at 7222. So the big breaking news is that China has agreed to lift sanctions on British MPs and peers with immediate effect. Keir Starmer has made that clear. They imposed the sanctions 5 years ago on Conservative MPs Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Nusrat Ghani, Tom Tugendhat and Neil O'Brien, and Tim Loughton, he's no longer in Parliament. They were amongst those targeted. 2 peers, Baroness Kennedy and Lord Alton as well, targeted. Now those sanctions have been lifted. Trevor Kavanagh is the former political editor of The Sun. Many have been questioning what the point of Keir Starmer's visit to China has been. Is this the point of it? As well as the visa-free travel for 30 days, Trevor? Is this enough, do you think? You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Peter. Don't forget the Scotch whisky, which is worth a couple of $100 million.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Yes, this is a big deal, isn't it? I mean, he's lifting these sanctions on perfectly respectable, democratically elected British MPs, which should never have been imposed in the first place. I mean, I think that your first reaction will be to see what Sir Ian Duncan-Smith says about this, but I suspect...
We're literally on the phone to him right now trying to get him on the programme after you, Trevor.
Well, I suspect he's not going to be very impressed. Look, this new deal that we're having with China, we won't know for a long time just how much we have surrendered in order to achieve a couple of £100 million worth of whiskey sales. I think that we already know that we're surrendering our security or putting it at extreme risk by allowing the Chinese to build this spy centre disguised as an embassy in the centre, the very heart of the City of London, where our finance system is based, and upon the actual cables, over the cables which link us to all the big financial hubs in Europe and the West. So, look, this is high-risk stuff, but I don't think that the Labour Party has ever encountered a communist regime that they haven't loved. And I think back to my very first visit to China, which was in 1976, when Chairman Mao was still alive and still on the throne.
Goodness me.
And we were aware then, not perhaps in full detail, but we were aware that millions of people. In the end, we now know that something like 20 to 30 million people were slaughtered during the reign of Chairman Mao. And yet the British Labour Party really never said a word of criticism, unlike the criticism, for instance, of Hitler, which is constantly raised as the spectre of dictator tyranny. No criticism of any serious nature ever made of a communist regime, wherever it may be.
It's a very, very good point. I wonder if you see any significance to Rachel Reeves not going. She was apparently dropped from the trip at the last minute in all of that, and what you see about that.
Well, a huge significance for Rachel Reeves herself. I think this is a vote of no confidence in her as Chancellor and as a senior player in the current Starmer-led Labour Party and government, because she's been shunted aside right through the point. I mean, the budget was something drawn up in Downing Street, number 10, not 11. And I think that ever since she was seen blubbing in Parliament, her star has basically crashed. I don't think she has. Her star is attached to Keir Starmer.
Yes.
And as long as he survives, she will, but not much longer.
Just on Keir Starmer, on these parliamentarians who are now allowed to go to China if they want to, I think the likelihood of Ian Duncan-Smith, going for a package holiday in Shanghai is limited. The Keir Starmer has said this has been a real cause for concern across Parliament, and therefore I did raise it and we had a discussion. And as a result, it's clear from the Chinese that the restrictions no longer apply. President Xi said that all that means is all parliamentarians are free to travel to China. He added that this change of Chinese policy couldn't have happened if we weren't there having a leader-to-leader exchange. It doesn't happen if you stick your head in the sand. Previously, the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, who haven't reacted to this just yet, it's literally just happened in the last 10 minutes or so, they have said previously, earlier today, we would rather remain under sanction indefinitely than have our status used as a bargaining chip to justify lifting British sanctions on those officials responsible for the genocide in Xinjiang. We would reject any deal that prioritises our personal convenience over the pursuit of justice for the Uyghur people. And the statement was signed by all the parliamentarians who were sanctioned. The UK government apparently not planning on lifting sanctions on Chinese officials, but clearly there is some movement here on all of this, and we have asked Ian Duncan-Smith, Tom Tugendhat and Tim Loughton to come on the programme, and perhaps they will. We'll see. I expect many journalists are getting in touch with them right now. Do you think Keir Starmer will look back on this and see it as a success, as a trip, and should we, Trevor?
Yes, he will, and we shouldn't. I mean, look, as I say, we don't know what we're sacrificing in return for this basically peanuts offer of a long and sophisticated relationship. Let's bear in mind that the last thing you could describe Keir Starmer as is sophisticated. We're going to import a lot of Chinese, excuse me, electronic goods, which are very high risk. Things like electric vehicles, which contain all sorts of software which constantly needs updating from Beijing. And those cars are not made by private companies with their own integrity. They are sanctioned by the Chinese government, and they contain whatever software and spyware that government decides to put in them. The same applies to all of our solar panels that we're going to start buying by the shed load. Cheap, but that's the way the Chinese do business. They give you something cheap and you pay dearly in the long run. So that's the problem we face with China now insinuating itself into the very heart of our government. And I think we will learn over time that we are surrendering our integrity and our authority and our independence.
Let me ask you about another story that has just broken in the last half an hour or so, Trevor. This is about the asylum seeker sentenced to a minimum of 29 years for stabbing a hotel worker to death. This is an absolutely dreadful case. Rhiannon White was stabbed 19 times with a screwdriver and 19 times in the head and 23 times in total. This was in October 2024 by Deng Chol Majek, who was caught on CCTV following her from the Park Inn Hotel in Walsall. He was put there as a small boat migrant who had come over from France. He lived there, she worked there, he followed her to Bescott Stadium Station, handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 29 years. I mean, this is just a dreadful thing that shouldn't have happened in the first place. Has justice been done, Trevor?
Well, I mean, 29 years, he'll serve. It's not a full life sentence. So he'll have a chance of having a parole at some point. But the whole issue of the murder and the sentence is almost irrelevant to the implications of how he got here in the first place, and how many hundreds and even thousands of others who will pose a security and crime risk to this country are coming across totally unvetted. They're being allowed in, and then all sorts of largesses being handed to them in terms of healthcare and psychiatric care and free phones and all sorts of other things. And I think that we are, again, in fact, I think we have already opened the door to a crime wave that we're not capable now in this current climate of dealing with. The police aren't doing anything. They're really impotent. And not only have we had this murder, we've got the case which is proceeding of the two men accused of raping a 12-year-old girl, two Afghan migrants. This is rampant across Britain right now. I mean, they will do their best, the officials in the government.
Trevor, do you just want a moment just to maybe get a drink and clear your throat, and we'll come back to you? Would that help you?
No, that's okay.
Oh, you're okay? Sorry, do go ahead.
So, you know, the risks are already there, and the government and the officials in the Home Office will do everything they possibly can to play down the degree of this sort of criminality. And we'll always see apologists who will say, these are vulnerable people who are seeking our help and our mercy. But we're not being repaid for that generosity and that hospitality.
Yeah. There's another big controversy around about councils facing a revolt over cancelled elections. In your long time looking at elections and covering politics, have you ever seen anything quite like this before? 30 different local authorities saying they don't actually want elections because of the pressure they've been put under by central government because of the changes in local government. It does seem extraordinary that these elections have been cancelled, and unsurprisingly, some of the councillors are now walking out as a result.
Well, I think they have to be applauded for this. After all, they are Labour councillors, and they're rebelling against their own undemocratic and authoritarian government, which is meddling in the democracy of this country. They deserve praise. And what is most disappointing is that some of these councils, which are not holding elections, are Tory. I mean, that really should be reversed very quickly. And we need these local council elections simply because otherwise any person who is unpopular in power would obviously say, well, I don't want to face the electorate because I'll lose my job, I'll lose my seat. They shouldn't be allowed to do this. They should be forced to face the electorate as they're expected to do every so many years.
Trevor, as always, thank you. Trevor Kavanagh there, former political editor of The Sun. We're going to talk to Baroness Kennedy, Helena Kennedy, who's one of these parliamentarians who is now allowed to go to China. My first question will be, are you now going to go? I think that highly unlikely, but we'll talk to her in the next few minutes. She's agreed to an interview. We will talk to you as well. Loads of people getting in touch about reform and the students. The report Kieran Galpin did earlier on about BBC diversity, about free speech. Whatever it is you want to talk to me about today, maybe it's something Trevor's clicked with you, or there's something on the tip of your tongue, whatever it is, 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls next here on Talk.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's get a voice note now. Rob has sent one in on Starmer's China trip. This is something we're going to be talking to Baroness Kennedy about in a second. She is one of the members of the House of Lords. Now the sanction against her lifted. Let's see what Rob has to say about the trip.
Keir Stalin, two-tier Keir, whatever you want to call him, is a vile man with no backbone whatsoever. He has ruined the UK, absolutely ruined. He's one of the most divisive men ever and the weakest Prime Minister in history for sure. But him in combination with that Sadiq Khan and the rest of the cronies he has, the rest of those clowns he has in that circus, they are absolutely bankrupt in this country. So, you know, let's get down to brass tacks here. He's over there with a begging bowl. He's got the begging bowl out, and that's what he's doing. He's begging for money because he is bankrupt in this country.
Rob, thank you for that. Lots of people getting in touch with texts as well. Sean says, does anyone think those politicians sanctioned by China care about the sanctions being lifted? Starmer is a pathetic, bad joke, says Sean in Bridlington. Well, we'll find out from one of them in a second. Baroness Kennedy will be with us in a few minutes' time. Nigel says, afternoon, Peter, great show. Thank you, Nigel. The country feels like I imagine 1930s Germany felt. Economic instability, weak democracy, legal exploitation, propaganda against opposition. The ideologies may be different, but that's about all there is, says Nigel. Sean's in Northampton, responding to Kieran Galpin's report a little bit earlier on about freedom of speech on university campuses. Sean, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
Well, thanks, Peter. Since I phoned, you've discussed so many different subjects I'd like to talk about, so I'll have to just pick one. But basically, before I start about schools and universities, that chap you interviewed before about equality of race on the TV being proportionate.
Yep.
You've only got to look at the TV adverts, haven't you? And I don't know about you. I've never considered myself to be racist, but when it's forced down my throat every day that everything in Britain in the houses are either multi-race or black, that really turns me off. So that's the only one thing I want to say on that.
Okay. Well, Sean, thank you. Sorry, go ahead. Make your point.
I will be brief, yeah. You're talking about universities and not having like reforming. This is going straight back to schools. My grandson's in a school now. He was taught in the last 2 weeks. He walked into his form room. You got a picture of Mussolini, a picture of Hitler, and a picture of Nigel Farage. These teachers are so left-wing.
Wow. Yeah. That is worrying. That is really actually worrying. Sean, listen, thanks for that and thanks for sharing that. And I mean, you may agree or disagree with Nigel Farage, but comparing him to Hitler is just a really, really crass thing to do. I want to talk now to Baroness Kennedy, Helena Kennedy, a member of the House of Lords for Labour and a member of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Now, earlier on, they said that they about this lifting of the sanctions against Baroness Kennedy and others as well, 5 MPs, 2 peers. They had said we would rather remain under sanction indefinitely than have our status used as a bargaining chip to justify lifting British sanctions on those officials responsible for the genocide in Xinjiang, the Uyghur Muslims. We would reject any deal that prioritises our personal convenience over the pursuit of justice for the Uyghur people. Now, the UK government not planning on lifting sanctions against Chinese officials. Let's speak to Baroness Kennedy. Thank you for joining me so swiftly, particularly after this breaking news, Baroness Kennedy. What is your reaction to what you've heard?
Well, I think that the statement that we've put together to respond is that, of course, China should never have sanctioned us in the first place. As parliamentarians, we were raising human rights abuses taking place in China, and particularly my concern is that I'm a lawyer and I do a lot of international human rights work, and what's been happening to the Uyghur is absolutely shocking. I mean, we're talking about women being forced sterilization and forced abortions, the people being thrown into what can only be described as concentration camps, and clear evidence of forced labor. And so the idea that, you know, we're having our sanctions lifted, I mean, the sanctions are a deep inconvenience. It means that I can't speak to friends of mine in Hong Kong who are pro-democracy activists or anything. I don't want to get them into trouble because I'm a sanctioned person. But also we were left with a level of anxiety that if we travel to countries where China has already got leverage and has been working very hard to make friends in parts of Africa and so on, that if one went there to do one's work, that we might be arrested and be at risk of being arrested at the behest of the Chinese government. So those were concerns that affected us. But it's small beer by comparison with what's being experienced by people inside China whose human rights are being abused all the time. And there's nothing being said, I have to say, there's nothing being said about Jimmy Lai. You know, Jimmy Lai was this pro-democracy newspaper owner. He published a newspaper in Hong Kong, and they trumped up charges. He's a British citizen. His children, he sent them to school here. I mean, he's a wealthy man, but he was a leading voice in promoting democracy and retaining the rule of law in Hong Kong. He's been convicted of trumped-up charges and has been in custody now for 6 years in solitary confinement. He's a Catholic. He's not allowed to see a priest or receive the Holy Communion or anything like that. And his health is failing, and his son, you've probably had him on your program.
We have, yeah, yesterday, yeah.
And you know, his family are actively saying they will move to Britain, and these are not going to be people who are going to be a drain on the United Kingdom. But I don't see anything being said about whether there's going to be any clemency or any arrangement to get Jimmy Lai, a British citizen, out of
So within all that, within the fact that these sanctions have been lifted on you and 6 others, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be any progress with Jimmy Lai, obviously for the Scotch whisky industry is going to feel happy about what's happened. That's a deal worth hundreds of millions of pounds. There will also be others who will, and Keir Starmer will look on this visit as a success. I wonder, do you think that your party leader, Keir Starmer, should have gone to China in the first place? And do you think what he has got from that visit is actually worthwhile?
Listen, I'm a believer. I'm part of IPAC because I think China has to be watched with great care, and I have been, the victim of cyber attacks in one form or another, coming undoubtedly from China. So I know the risk that China poses to us. However, I also think that the only way that you make headway is to have discourse with the people who pose threats to you, that you have to talk very straight to them. And in certain areas, it is useful to have trading agreements with them, because you can be damn sure that, every other country will be doing that. But our vigilance has to be very real, because China, Russia, Iran, these nations pose threats to the peace of the world. And yes, you can work at one level with them, but you have to be very canny about the ways that they can pose threats. I would have liked, I had no objection to Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, going out and taking part and bringing with him business people who want to have their items sold in China, like whiskey. And you can hear I'm a Scot. But I do also think that that you have to really talk straight and be very clear about the things where we just will not remain silent. And they tried to silence parliamentarians. We were sanctioned because we were raising these issues in Parliament and informing our co-parliamentarians about the horrors that are going on in China. So, yes, let's have dialogue, but the dialogue has to have not a whisper at the end of a conversation and saying, if you want to come to Britain and you want to come and meet people in Parliament, it would be very difficult if there are people sanctioned. I don't want that mealy-mouthed kind of conversation. I want it to be direct, talking about the fact that we don't agree with their way of doing of conducting their society.
I want to ask you a question specifically on human rights in just a second, but before I do, I just want to ask you whether you ever see yourself on Chinese soil at any stage in the rest of your life.
I think it's very unlikely because I have been to China several times. I used to be the chair of the British Council, and we did lots of cultural exchange things, and we tried to. I mean, we played quite a big role when China was wanting to come into the global market. We did some serious training of them around commercial law and the expectations that you have to, if you contract with people, you have to, your obligations to live by that contract are very real. There's some places where that doesn't happen, let me tell you. But China was very keen to understand commercial law and to its obligations and so forth. So we did a lot of work, and I've been a number of times to China. I like the Chinese people, and we've always got to separate governments from the folk, because we know that often people themselves would like things to be different. But I don't imagine that I'll ever be able to go to China, because although they may have lifted these sanctions, I'm still going to be very cautious about conversations that I have with my friends who are pro-democracy and who live and are lawyers and have been parliamentarians in Hong Kong. I know that I'm not going to take any chances in going there, because I suspect that I'd be put on a plane and returned rather speedily.
Speaking of human rights, which is something you've spent a career, a life fighting for, you've mentioned the horrors that go on with the Uyghur Muslims. I know you've written a report recently on Gaza. I know that you're concerned about human rights in many parts of the world. Why is it, do you think, as someone who is very focused on this area, that there are many thousands of people who will come onto the streets to protest about Gaza, which they're obviously completely entitled to do so peacefully, but when it comes to Uyghur Muslims, when it comes to the Iranian regime, we find much less interest in that when it comes to genocide in Nigeria, for example, in Sudan? Why is that, do you think, Baroness Kennedy?
Listen, I think it's because we have such close relations with Israel, and I've gone many times to Israel and have friends living there and so on. I think it's about our proximity and the fact that Israel is a democracy. I mean, we don't have any pretense about China or Russia in the ways that they are totalitarian. I mean, that's not true of Israel, and so I think that is the thing that fires people up about. But you've got to remember that it was a very current conflict, and it was leading to hugely high levels of death, and people were seeing it on their screens. We don't get to see things on our screens.
You could say the same thing about Iran at the moment, though, couldn't you?
Well, even Iran. I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on Iran just now, but of course they've closed down the opportunity to get journalists into Iran, and China. You don't see what's happening to the Uyghur because you don't have a free media. You don't have a free, and in fact, it was very disappointing to me that Israel closed down the opportunity of journalists getting into Gaza to cover the war.
There was still a lot of reporting of Gaza, though, in the way that there hasn't been of Iran, for example.
Oh yeah, I mean, because they've closed down the internet, and the internet did operate within Gaza, and it gave the opportunity to young journalists who were basically using the internet for and getting word out that way. But it proved very difficult, and it's strange that big journalistic organisations didn't make more of an issue out of the fact that they were expelled and not allowed to enter and cover a war. And the great thing about Zelensky is that he's had no inhibitions about that. He lets the press in, and the press have all covered what's been going on, and we see with our own eyes the horrors of what Russia's doing.
Baroness Kennedy, thank you. That is Helena Kennedy there, Labour peer, member of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Lots in that. She has now had those sanctions lifted against her, as have 6 other parliamentarians. Lots to discuss on all of this. Be sure to give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. In just a second, we're going to talk about Montgomery Toms. We're going to talk to the freedom campaigner Montgomery Toms, assaulted, attacked and arrested during a university debate. Stay with us for more on this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in just a second, but I want to speak to Montgomery Toms now, who's a student at the London College of Communications. They've been contacted for comment about this story. Montgomery, tell me what happened to you.
Hi there. Yes, thanks for having me on. Just a quick thing, I'm an ex-student of London College of Communication. Okay. That's just for clarity. I went there about over a year ago now, I think 2 years ago now, and I was only there for a short amount of time because I didn't go along with their kind of woke, white privilege pronoun mentality, which is not something I'm a big fan of.
And actually, we're talking about that today in regard to Sussex University. We had a report earlier on in the programme from our reporter Kieran Galpin about the fact that there are students at Sussex University who don't even believe that Reform UK should be allowed to have a stand at their Freshers' Fair, for example. So yes, sorry, apologies, Montgomery. Tell us what happened to you.
No worries. So essentially I returned to the university, but just to point out, it's public ground, so I wasn't on private property, with a debate table discussing mass deportations, a topic that is discussed with the highest polling party in the country. So it's not like this is something that's totally on the fringes. This is a very mainstream topic. And I went there to engage in calm, rational debate. I was having a conversation with a student. An intern, somebody who disagreed with me but isn't able to articulate why they disagree with me respectfully, came up behind me, grabbed my table, flipped it over, damaged my equipment, and into my cameraman, who's not my security, he's my cameraman and editor, his name's Will Coleshill, stepped in immediately to restrain this individual. And obviously there's some legalities that I've been asked not to discuss because this is now a legal case.
Sure, but we can't actually just look at what happened and see that if you're watching on the screen. Just let's have a look at that.
Well, they already have come.
Yeah.
We don't like it because they're trying to take our land.
Right. You're under arrest. I have the right to conduct a citizen's arrest, and he is under arrest. I'm detaining him under my breach of police powers. He's not going anywhere. Sit here until the police arrive. Sit.
So that was someone overturning the table there, and that must have been pretty scary for you. It came from behind you, there was no warning, obviously, and you were in the middle of a discussion.
Yeah, mid-discussion, as I say, incapable of having a calm, rational debate, frustrated by the fact he disagrees with me, turns the table. But what's really interesting, and I'm happy to expand on certain aspects here, is immediately Will, who is currently, restraining him, says to me to call the police. So I call the police immediately, and I say, look, I've just been assaulted, my equipment's been damaged, that we're currently holding this guy, please come as soon as possible. What happens is the university lecturers, security, and students start piling in on Will, and they start pulling him, they start kicking him, and eventually put him on a headlock on the ground. So suddenly we've gone, things are really starting to escalate, but the police turn up, and things are calm, things are separated, and I'm talking to a police officer about what's happened. Now, this is really, really crucial because I can't say for fact, but I will leave it to the viewers to watch the original footage and make their own conclusions based on the last kind of 5-6 years of policing. But as soon as they discovered what it is I was debating, which was, the deportation of, of illegal migrants, etc., their entire attitude towards the situation changed. And I was told by the police officer I was speaking to, well, kind of what do you expect if you're going to talk about this? I don't know why you're surprised. You've essentially caused this. This is your fault. It's like, well, no, they scoffed. And Will also reports that he saw them laughing and at the banner too. So then Will goes over to go and speak to an officer who was questioning the guy that assaulted me originally that Will had restrained, and suddenly the officer shoves him. Naturally, Will's just gone through a huge amount. He reacts, and then they pile on Will.
I should just be absolutely clear that we don't have, obviously, the police's view of this or their version of events, but certainly this was something that, your free speech should have been absolutely sacrosanct. When you look at some of the statistics, when you look at the fact that people say, students certainly believe they believe in free speech, but that clearly didn't happen in your case. It hasn't happened at Sussex, and it hasn't happened on so many campuses. What do you think, Montgomery?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I also want to agree and impress upon, I'm talking purely from my perspective here, from what I saw, and I'm not quoting, legalities at all. That's just my perspective, and people can go and watch the footage and make their own mind up.
Sure.
For me, I'm definitely observing within the police force and within universities, like we've seen recently around the case that you're discussing regarding reform. Universities are so captured by these ideas and ideologies that they even look towards one of the highest polling parties and go, they're racist, and it's just utterly ridiculous. And the universities and the state is responsible for peddling this. And one of the reasons I went back to the universities, when I was in the institution originally, they told me that because I'm white, I have white privilege and I have to recognize that. I have to wear a pronoun badge. I have to atone for my history. I have to write essays about critical race theory, including the slave trade. And these are all things. And I was studying photography, nothing to do with history or philosophy. And they were asking me to look into these topics. So this is, universities are so captured by this. The lecturers are, the states, the students are, that this is why we're getting these kind of reactions. And that's why it's the responsibility of young people that just want to have debates. I don't even care if I disagree with you. I admire anyone that is capable of having an open debate. This is what we really need to be pushing for. If you disagree with me, fine. But that doesn't mean that it should turn to violence. It doesn't mean that I should be attacked in any way, or anyone else for that matter.
Thank you. That's Montgomery Toms there, a freedom campaigner. London College of Communications have been contacted for a comment. If they send it to us, we will, of course, tell you. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. Jackie's in Oldham and has some thoughts on free speech on campus. Jackie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
I am extremely scared of the future of this country if we are producing a section of our younger generation that is so intolerant, that has been captured by really Marxist ideology, which is occurring in universities. And I know this because I have a child that has gone through the university system, and he is captured by this same ideology.
Does he believe it? Is he brainwashed by it, or she?
Yeah, absolutely brainwashed by it. And what happens is, when somebody has been indoctrinated and, you know, like a cult-like status, people...
What was Christmas dinner like in your house, Jackie?
It's...
a few debates there, perhaps?
It can be a bit touchy.
Right. So how old is... Sorry, a son or a daughter? Son, okay. How old is your son?
He's 32.
Okay, so he's
still at home.
So his views are very, very different from yours, Jackie, then?
Yeah, he's so intolerant that if I have talkTV on, he gets triggered because he cannot listen to alternative points of view. He cannot. And
you think that's because of his university? Did you notice a change before and after university, or perhaps during university? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is what? How do you think it happened? Was it through the curriculum? Was it through fellow students? Was it through academics? What actually happened, do you think?
I think it's a mixture of all three. And I think that what worries me is the behaviour is symptomatic of like a neurosis, like a mental instability, that as soon as, you know, they hear something that doesn't align with what they believe, they become emotional and cannot control themselves. And to get to the
I don't know about you, Jackie, but I hear things that don't align with my values and don't align with my beliefs every single day of the week. And it's just the nature of society. It's that it's the fact that people disagree, and with your politics, Jackie, which I know a little bit, obviously, because we've spoken a few times. You still thinking of standing as a councillor, by the way?
Well, I've had a health issue.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Jackie.
But I still firmly believe in what reform is standing for. And when you look at the two different scenarios, the other parties over the decades have been very much that when there's a problem, we ban something, we find something, we do something. Reform is standing for the opposite. Reform is standing for freedom, freedom of people to choose.
Well, listen, Jackie,
the intolerant left can't cope with it.
Well, Jackie, as you know, I am politically homeless and don't support any political party, but I may not necessarily agree with Oldham needs reform, but I think Oldham needs Jackie, and I wish you well, Jackie, with your health issues as well, and perhaps maybe sometime you could seek elected office. Whoever does that, from whatever party, I always praise them and say that's a good thing. It's a big thing to, put your name on the ballot paper, go out there and actually say that you want to be elected. So I wish everybody who's doing that in the council elections, whoever they are, I wish them well, even though there are some people I absolutely fundamentally disagree with, of course. That was Jackie there. We'll talk in a second about reform as well, but specifically about veterans attacking Starmer for working with the disgraced lawyer Phil Shiner. Chris Parry's coming up. He's a former Rear Admiral. He's a Reform UK mayoral candidate for Hampshire and honorary president of Veterans for Reform. Stay with us here on Talk.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So just over a week ago, the Labour government passed in the House of Commons a bill that would prosecute more Northern Ireland veterans, the Troubles Bill. But since then, there's been a lot of reporting, particularly in the Daily Telegraph, about Keir Starmer and what he did circa 2008, so about 18 years ago, working with the disgraced solicitor Phil Shiner on prosecuting Iraq veterans. And now the former commander of the British Army, of a British Army regiment in Iraq, has expressed his deep frustration, as he puts it, with Keir Starmer over his involvement in the investigation and prosecution of veterans. The Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Gray, the former commanding officer of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, said the investigations had caused his colleagues significant mental trauma. He's written a letter to the Daily Telegraph expressing deep frustration at the revelation that Phil Shiner's inquiry into the actions of B Company following the Battle of Danny Boy involved legal arguments provided by Keir Starmer. My officers and soldiers who fought bravely alongside Sergeant Brian Wood and other members of the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment never faced charges, yet they endured years of investigation and suffered from significant mental trauma. We are concerned that such inquiries appear to equate enemy combatants with British forces. This simply does not make sense. The enemy is trying to thwart British national interests while our soldiers are endeavouring to secure them. We know that Reform UK held a big event on Monday about veterans that was perhaps overshadowed in the media by the fact that Suella Braverman has defected to Reform UK. So I want to get back to this issue of veterans particularly, and the person who is well placed to talk about it is Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CBE, who's Honorary President of Veterans for Reform and Reform UK's mayoral candidate for Hampshire, the Isle of Wight and the Solent. Chris, great to have you on the programme. Tell me what you make of this story, of what the Daily Telegraph is reporting, and indeed what Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Gray has said in his letter.
Well, Peter, thanks for asking. This has been a constant frustration and, as you've seen, trauma for quite a lot of veterans for some considerable time now. I mean, I served in Northern Ireland. I flew aircraft there, but I didn't go on the ground so much. I've been in several conflicts. And I think the idea that people who have no idea of what combat or operations are like should be in a position of, A, trying to present a legal argument that relates to today rather than the times in which these incidents took place, and indeed have no idea of the context in which these things happen. It is a bit of an affront, to tell you the truth. It's an insult to people who fought bravely, who fought within the rules of engagement given by politicians. Let's remember this. And at the end of the day, if people are trying to make their names and trying to make their careers by chasing our veterans, it's back to what you probably don't remember, a thing called ambulance chasing.
Oh, I do, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Well, Phil Shiner was definitely an ambulance chaser and someone who has absolutely no integrity whatsoever. And Keir Starmer could not see through that. And that worries me, that there was someone of Keir Starmer's supposed intellect who was duped by Phil Shiner.
Yeah, but I think ambition and I think a desire to get on, make a name for yourself, all these things, it happens in every profession. But I think there comes a point where human decency says, you know what, I'm not doing the right thing here. I'm looking at the evidence on one side, I'm looking at the context on the other, and am I really doing the right thing? One of the things I find very suspicious about some of these human rights lawyers in these cases is somehow the cab rank system allows them to take all of these cases, and yet they don't stand up for people who are on the other side of the fence, for example, the right-wing lunatics.
And actually, in the particular case that the Daily Telegraph highlighted, this was pro bono. This was work. This wasn't even on the cab rank. This was something Keir Starmer elected to do because he felt it was the right thing to do, despite the fact that the person in question had been cleared twice. He wanted to prosecute that person again. I wonder, just in relation to both Northern Ireland and Iraq, Afghanistan, all the conflicts that people have been taking, that have our brave forces have taken part in. Certainly, where I'm from, Northern Ireland, the peace process would not have been possible were it not for the great bravery and distinction of the vast majority of the 300,000 people who served in uniform during the course of the Troubles. There were some of them, though, Chris, who fell below the standards, who didn't follow orders, who were not acting within the orders that they were given or the context that the politicians were talking about. What should happen to them, do you think? Because some people say there should be no prosecutions ever of any person who served their country. But what if they went outside the bounds of what they were supposed to be doing, as happened in Northern Ireland on a number of occasions and has happened in conflicts since?
Yeah, Peter, look, let's be clear. If you go outside the rules of engagement and you actually commit a crime, you have to be prosecuted. There's no question about that. But you've got to have a balance of evidence. I mean, I think the Crown Prosecution Service says you have to have a 73% chance of conviction to actually take things forward. Well, that threshold is way below for veterans at the moment. So even the mere imputation that that's the case is the issue. But I think what I object to is the application of today's laws, especially those since 2000, since the Tony Blair era, to circumstances that occurred 30 years before. This is like saying to the Duke of Wellington or Admiral Nelson, you're not allowed to fight like that, and we're going to prosecute you for it. It's totally unjust. And as you know, in reform, we're saying we're going to have an act of oblivion. There comes a point where you've got to say that evidence is not reliable. You can't prosecute and keep chasing after people. And if indeed you have been convicted in the past, of course, I think a future reform government's going to seek a pardon in the same way that IRA people got these comfort letters from Tony Blair, which of course we didn't hear about until the Good Friday Agreement was produced.
Although they were rescinded, of course, later on by Theresa Villiers, who was a Conservative Secretary of State. Chris, thank you for that. That's Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CBE, Honorary President of Veterans for Reform and Reform UK's mayoral candidate for Hampshire, the Isle of Wight and the Solent. Mike in Stoke-on-Trent has been in touch. Give me a ring on 0344 499 1000 about Kieran Galpin's report earlier on these different Reform UK issues, people saying they don't want them on campus. Mike, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say? Mike in Stoke-on-Trent. Oh, we've just lost him. We'll see if we can get him back in just a second. Let's see what Darryl has been saying about this. Darryl says that incident on the university campus where the man was attacked sounds very reminiscent of 1930s Germany. The left accused Reform of being racist, but they're actually behaving like neo-Nazis themselves. It's very worrying that Labour and the left are becoming so much like the Nazi Party. Mike, we have you back. What would you like to say?
Just two very quick things. Going back to veterans first and foremost. If anybody's surprised at what Starmer and Herman have done in the past, I'm not. Nothing surprising me with them.
We knew at least some of their record anyway. You're right to say that, Mike, yeah.
Yeah, right. If our lads are going to be prosecuted, are they going to cancel the comfort letters and go after the terrorists?
Well, the comfort letters have been cancelled. They have been rescinded, but that happened a number of years ago. But certainly what often happens is that, has happened occasionally, is that these court cases fall apart. That certainly happened with John Downey, who was allegedly the Hyde Park bomber.
Yeah, I mean, but going back to the thing I did call you about, these students in Sussex, they have made death threats. A student has been attacked and bitten, according to reports on the media.
Yeah.
Right? Are they going to be arrested and get the same sentence?
Well, they should be. They absolutely should be. The problem is they often don't know where a lot of these threats come from. They're anonymous. They're online. Do you worry about free speech at our campuses, Mike?
Yes, I do, because it's not free.
Yeah.
I mean, they're being indoctrinated. Everybody is entitled to an opinion. Just because I don't like what you say doesn't say I'm going to come around and beat you with a baseball bat.
Well, exactly, and that's the point of free speech. It's disagreeing without being disagreeable, Mike, isn't it?
They call Reform fascist. But what are the left wing then?
Well, I just don't think there's anything in calling Reform UK fascist. I know what fascism is, and it's not what they do. Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, Peter. I am a Reform supporter. I mean, like most working people, I've been Labour most of my life, and I'm so disenfranchised with them. It's unbelievable.
Well, so many people feel that way, as we can see from the polls. Mike, thank you very much. That's Mike in Stoke-on-Trent. Lots of common sense from him, and more on the way from Ian Collins, who'll be here after the news. Hello, Ian.
You really set the bar quite high there with the common sense. There.
Oh, do you think some of it might be forthcoming?
We're going to do our best. We've got a lot to get through. Has it been busy this afternoon? Busy this morning?
It is busy. There are lots of people who want their say on diversity, on students' free speech. There are loads of different
BBC
issues.
And diversity.
Well, indeed, it's an interesting one. But also the breaking news about China as well. And we had Baroness Kennedy on talking about having her the sanctions lifted. I don't think she's planning, a package weekend in Shanghai anytime soon, though. I think she's unlikely to go there.
When they talked about visas being relaxed, and I thought, I can't recall the last time any mate or colleague went, off to China for a weekend.
Yeah.
Don't really think that's a big thing.
I know a few people who've gone.
Who've gone for work.
Yeah.
And I know one or two people who've gone out of curiosity. But I wouldn't say coming back with a relaxed visa agreement was kind of on the top of the list of great achievements of our times.
Well, indeed, absolutely. And I think a lot of people will agree with that there's actually very little that's come back.
We are going to talk, of course, we'll pick up on the diversity issue as well in the BBC. And, the curious, I'd love to be in the meetings when they decide, well, why don't we get that, we're doing this old thing about cockneys of the East End in the 1970s. So we've got this Sikh chap with a turban who's going to play the archetypal cockney. I mean, you could have a Sikh cockney, by the way. That's possible.
That is possible. What was that? Is that your phone?
Oh, mate. It's the Sikh Cockney guy. He said, I got the job. There you go.
Excellent. Well, the one I enjoyed was when Henry VIII was played by a black man in a wheelchair. I'm just like I've nothing against